Well, good morning and welcome to the January 14th, 2016 Planning Commission meeting. Let the record show that all the commissioners are present. At this time, I'd like for you to join me with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Next, we have our public comment period. If there is someone in the audience that would like to address the Planning Commission on a land use issue that is not on our agenda this morning, this would be your opportunity.
Hello, my name is Jim Vatwoni, and I'm here on behalf of our business, Pure Organic Medicinals.
Sorry, can you
Who?
get speak up?
Sorry about that. My name is Jim Vatwoni, and I'm here representing Pure Organic Medicinals, and I just request that we have a zoning amendment that we're having process of permit. It's a 2014-067 GPA. It's concerning 3466 East Highway 12 in Valley Springs, and it's a rezoning for land use, and we would just like to be able to put that on a future agenda to be heard by you folks, in front of you folks.
Okay, I guess you would be working with Mr. Maurer on that?
Yeah, Mr. Maurer, yes.
Okay.
So just from what we understand, our process is complete, and we just want it to be heard so we can get on with our business and rezone the property. That's all.
Well, I'm sure it will be.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. You must have a really long name.
Well, yeah, my name is long, but I put the address and also
Okay.
our business name.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for signing in. Appreciate that. Sure. Anyone else? All right, we're going to continue on. Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up.
Everyone wants to be last.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning to the commission. Nice seeing you all again. I know you've probably been struggling with some withdrawal, having not had a marijuana update lately, so I wanted to make sure to be here today to give you one. With our friends and neighbors down in the valley and around California, just wanted to bring you up to date of what's going on with other planning commissions and boards of supervisors. Recently, the City of Angels Camp they're on the verge of banning marijuana within the City of Angels Camp. And also very recently, as reported in the January 11th edition of the Stockton Record, every city in San Joaquin County, in addition to the county itself, has banned all marijuana activities, citing crime and public nuisance as the major reason. That includes Stockton, Ripon, Lodi, Manteca, and then after that, got an email from Sheriff Christensen in Stanislaus County. Stanislaus County is moving towards a total ban, or they have a ban of marijuana activities in the county. Tuolumne County will soon be changing their ordinances to just allow small grows, and that's up to 6 plants. This morning in the Modesto Bee, we see that the city of Modesto is now on board and has banned all marijuana activities in the city of Modesto. Originally, they had looked at personal grows and decided to not even do that. I might add that a lot of these communities had bans in place prior to the 266 scheme coming out. And they've gone back and taken this opportunity to tighten them up or to reach out and ban more activities that have been listed as potential activities by 266. And that would include transportation, mobile dispensaries, warehousing or distribution, and a couple other things. So now that those things have been identified by the state of California, all these communities have gone back and done the housekeeping to clean those up so that they don't get those in their cities and counties. So right now, the number of cities and counties in the state of California that have banned or have moratoria on marijuana is reaching 83%. They will soon approach 88%, which is the same number of cities and counties in Colorado that have banned marijuana there. They don't want any part of it. So there seems to be an overall trend that about 90% of the people, 80 to 90% of the people, don't want it in our community. And communities, like I say, planning commissions and boards around the state are listening to their constituents. Where the plan is right now in Calaveras County, I'm not entirely sure. So I'm sure it'll be moving forward. I don't know if an ordinance is going to be crafted that will transit the Planning Commission. I certainly hope so, and we'll see. But the bit of news is the deadline that was attached to 266, which we refer to as the C4 clause, I think has been eliminated. It was supposed to go before the state Senate. The Assembly passed it last week. It was supposed to be before the state Senate yesterday. And if the state Senate passes that bill, it will then go on to the governor for signature. Whether it was a ban, modification, elimination, we're uncertain at this point, but it was AB 21 that removed the C4 clause. So it isn't officially gone yet, but it doesn't seem to be affecting other cities and counties from taking this opportunity to clean up the marijuana mess, because the grow season will be starting before you know it. Of other interest is AB 26. I don't know if the Planning Commission will be following that. I believe it's 26. Mr. Maurer would know. It's an attempt by the Assembly to craft laws which will, from what we understand, will limit the ability of cities and counties, restrain their jurisdiction, if you will. And why they're doing that now, I'm not entirely sure, but it's on our radar with the state group that I represent. And we'll be following it. If anything comes up, I'll be reporting that to you. But for some reason, I think it's tied to marijuana. So in any case, that's my report. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. I think I can answer maybe Mr. McManus's question. The reason people are reluctant to is because all of this extra energy being put into this banning and pointing fingers will probably soon be moot, because when the petitions and major feelings of the population of California decide to take the route of Colorado and decide that marijuana will be able to be made recreational, then all of this extra energy is going to be a waste of time and people's money and energy. I think that might answer his question that he posed to you. He doesn't want me to look at him, but I'm directing my comments to his constant attempt to undermine people's access to their medicine, because it is a medicine that is used not for smoking pot, you know, like some people over here seem to think that's all it is. It has been refined into salves, edibles, cancer treatment in the form of little pills that don't get you high. They alleviate pain and avoid sleeping disorders, nausea related to treatment of cancer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, since the comments were directed at me, can I respond?
No, I don't believe so. Because their comments are actually directed at us.
Oh, no, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. I mean, they should be directed at us. Yeah.
Okay, that part's right.
Okay. Sure, his name was mentioned. Yeah, so was our name mentioned, too.
Because of my writing, I'm going to leave the card so you can each not have to worry about that piece of paper.
Anyone else?
Good morning, I'm Tanya Dawson from Valley Springs, and I just wanted to bring something to your attention that I think is going to be very important in the upcoming future. It appears that our local planning authority is being undermined by the federal affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. The federal enforcement of sustainable development smart growth cities, now through the AFFH, that's the abbreviation for it. Local planning will be overseen by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. So the AFFH requires agencies and communities that apply for HUD grants to detail income levels, religion, color, and national origin of every single person living in every neighborhood of the community. They will then determine any imbalances and, if necessary, force a massive shift of people into such neighborhoods to achieve the desired balance. Unelected governing boards who do not represent the voters, electorally unaccountable regional commissions, will set targets for the desired percentage of types of people to live in each area of the region. So it's already being implemented in Dubuque. It gives us a little insight of some of the things that could be to come. Dubuque was pressured to cede large swaths of its governing authority to HUD, which has forced the city to direct its limited low-income Section 8 housing resources not to its own needy citizens, but to voucher holders from Chicago. The problem is that very few of these new public housing residences ever lived or paid taxes in Dubuque or even Iowa, and the feds have essentially commandeered Dubuque to solve Chicago's public housing shortage. So to me, this is kind of a scary trend. It's top-down, state to central government kind of government instead of from the people up, the government for the people, by the people. And it looks like we're heading into a dangerous direction. So if there's ever any opportunity to influence the rejection of HUD grants, please, let's see if we can refuse HUD grants. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Bob Dean. I'm a resident of Calaveras County, and I also sit on the board of the Motherlode Land Trust. And there's something that went on in the last board meeting that really disturbed me. I've been involved as a private citizen and as a director with Calaveras County Water District for the previous 9 years in general plan update issues. In fact, I came before the then seated Board of Supervisors in this chamber and asked them to support and got an affirmative response on developing a water element for the general plan, which has subsequently been trashed. I think much to the, not certainly to just my dismay, but also to the great detriment of Calaveras County. And also, another point that I need to make, at least with regard to myself, is that the events of the last 5 months, essentially, from September and the Butte Fire on, have made it pretty difficult for me to follow closely the actions and the activities that have been taking place with the Planning Commission. And I say that because it's perhaps maybe my irresponsibility not to be able to come and address some of the issues, but it goes specifically for me to the concern that was raised about conservation easements. Now, I hate to bring this thing back, but I think it's absolutely critical that this be discussed in the context that I'm going to present it. I am by nature a person who looks for the good and the positive in people, and I try to find those areas of common ground where we can work together to solve solutions, or certainly at least discuss problems. Even though we can't agree, you can certainly achieve a certain level of respect for another individual by knowing where they're coming from and having them understand where you're coming from. And in this particular instance, the thing that disturbed me more than anything else, and I hate to single out an individual, but Commissioner Worcester, your position vis-a-vis conservation easements is, I think, not only openly hostile, but almost an aberrant situation that I think needs to have a certain level of disclosure made before this body, and perhaps maybe even before the Board of Supervisors, and certainly before the people of Calaveras County. I listened to you at the last meeting. Unfortunately, we never had an opportunity to meet, so we have never had a conversation as a sidebar where we could have perhaps maybe addressed some of the things that I brought up earlier. But I have found out that you own a piece of property that has a conservation easement, and at some point in time you sued to have that easement vacated, and you lost not only the well, essentially the appeal. I didn't read the detail of it, so I don't have all the information I need. I would like you, if you would, at some point in time in the not too distant future, but obviously you can't do it now because this is public comment, give us a disclosure about your feelings about this thing and how it impacted you personally, and how that personal impact is reflected on how you deal with issues in the Planning Commission. Because it would seem to me that if we're going to be discussing not just conservation easements and mitigations and the future of open space and the future of economic development in Calaveras County and the quality of life of Calaveras County, this information needs to be public, and it needs to be available to anybody who's part of the decision-making process. And I would ask you to please, at some point in time, disclose this information to not just your fellow planning commissioners, but and the people sitting here, but also to the residents of Calaveras County, so that we can make a judgment and have the kind of balance that we need to have in making these decisions about our future. I would think that at some point in time, had we had this conversation in the past, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. But I would thank you for that. I suspect that if we were able to sit down and have an amicable conversation, we'd have an awful lot in common. And I want to say that I'm not bringing this up with any level of hostility, but I am stating that it's something that I think is absolutely critical. It needs to be known before we move forward and make these kinds of decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, we are going to be moving on with our consent agenda, which there is none. So then we are moving on to the public hearing, which is the review and recommendation of the Board of Supervisors on the general plan update. And our topic of discussion today is, so I guess we're continuing our public hearing on the general plan update from our previous meetings. And the topic of discussion today is the conservation and open space element. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Maurer.
Thank you. Good morning, Peter Maurer, Planning Director. We are now moving on with the conservation open space element. The conservation open space element is a combination of two mandated elements from state law, conservation and open space. There's a lot of overlap between the two, and we decided before I got here to combine those two into a single element. There's nothing that requires them to be separate as long as we're addressing all of the issues. So the state law, outside of the housing element, probably conservation open space has most requirements of what to look for in an element of the general plan. It covers a broad range of issues from recreation, open space, and when I say open space, it's sort of in the very broadest consideration of what open space is. It's not just public recreation land, it's just not federally or state or publicly owned land, but it's all of the concepts of open space that we consider. It includes management of resources, it includes water recharge areas, it includes a broad range of issues that we need to look at. Not all of them mandate policies, but it's just something we need to consider as we go through looking at these issues with the county. We received a great number of comments last spring on this element, a lot of interest in this. I reviewed all of those comments and incorporated those that I felt were consistent with board direction, the vision statement that you previously adopted and was ratified by the board last month, as well as just what I thought were good recommendations, you know, from my professional planning experience. The element was revised to include some of those comments. I'm sure there's others that you know, other people feel strongly about that weren't included, and that's what this hearing is about today. At least hopefully we can get through much of it. I'm not sure we'll be able to get through the whole thing today, but we'll do our best. So I've added some additional text in the introduction portion of the element to help explain some of the things. I hope that helps in some areas. There was some detailed information on rare and endangered species and vegetation types that I didn't feel belonged in this component. It was more technical background information, and that will be added to the background report, which hopefully will be coming back in 2 weeks. There are a lot of new state requirements regarding greenhouse gas emissions that we need to address. I've sort of beefed up the discussion of that to help explain why that's in there, and there's some additional policies that have been added to that. I think probably at this point, the best thing to do would be to sort of dive into it and see what you think of my recommendations. Are there any sort of overall questions that you might have?
I have one to start with. You mentioned the board having approved the guiding principles, vision statement and guiding principles that this commission passed. And that was, what, a few weeks ago?
Yes.
Any effect on this element as you look back through it with that in mind? Was there anything that you thought that caught your eye that's not in compliance, or we need some adjustment there?
No, I didn't really find anything along that. And it just could be my perspective, maybe different from others, but I didn't see anything that was out of line with those principles. Given that we still have to work within the context of state law, there are some things that we probably, some would not like to see in the county's general plan based on those, but we have to address them anyway, otherwise it would be inconsistent with state law, and we do still need to meet that. So it's that balancing act of trying to meet a bunch of different competing demands, that trying to find that fine line in the middle.
I do have a general question. When I read the definition of what a conservation element is, which was provided to us in the government code, and then I go back to the 1996 general plan and what was contained in the conservation element there, what it looks to me as if a great deal of what is now in the resource production optional element would be equally suited for the conservation element. And it seems to me there's a great deal of overlap there. One's mandatory, the conservation easement, and the resource production one is not. But the question I have is, would our general plan fit better with the statutes and be more defensible, if you will, if the resource production element were called conservation and resource production or something like that, to make it clear that what's in there is responsive to what the state's requiring as a conservation element. And I don't expect an answer today, but perhaps that's something legal counsel could talk to us
I'll
about.
certainly talk to council about that. My initial response would be, I don't think it makes a difference what we call it, as long as the components are there. And we can reorganize it any way we think is appropriate. And because of the nature of this county, the board decided that a resource production element, an optional element, that does contain some of the mandated requirements, but we want to focus that on resource production, would be consistent with state law. And it's part of the flexibility that is built into tailoring a general plan to the needs of the specific community that's provided in state law. As long as we include somewhere in the plan, and it's all supposed to be integrated together, those requirements that are listed, we can organize it any way we want to. And there's some things that are in the conservation section and the open space requirements that we've also put into the public facilities element, which is also optional. But it's just a different way to organize and arrange the requirements and the information and the policy language.
I found a lot of overlap, and I've made note of those, and so I'm questioning also why include a component in more than one element?
Where there is true duplication, I've tried to eliminate that in the prior draft that came out last year. There was, when I looked at the previous drafts, there were duplicate policies all over the place, and just, it seemed crazy to have the same policy, actually, verbatim language in 3 different elements. We didn't need to have it. It just made it, a lot more cumbersome and unwieldy. I may not have gotten all of them. And so if there's some areas that you feel that we've already addressed in the resource production element, or more appropriately should address in some other element, it doesn't need to be in here.
Okay.
And we can work through that.
Yeah, there wasn't a reason for including duplication. If anything, you were trying to eliminate duplication?
Right, exactly. And there may be some slight variances between, one policy versus another, in one element that maybe I thought was, sufficiently different to warrant being in both elements. But we'd have to go back and sort of look at that. Is there some specific ones that you've identified? We can.
It shouldn't be an understanding on the part of the public that if you see language or the direction or a goal that is more or less duplicated in 2 or 3 elements, it doesn't make it more important because it was duplicated?
No. I'd say every policy or goal should have pretty much equal weight. But as you get into implementing the plan, there will be some that are, there is a term of art that was called it was used in a court case, and certain policies that are mandatory, specific, and I always forget the third word that the court used on certain policies that we don't have much flexibility on those. We have to abide by those. In general, when the county is implementing its plan, you're looking at sort of the broad picture, and you're looking at, well, say there's a project, and it meets 15 out of 18 applicable policies. We could find that that is consistent with our general plan. There may be some parts of it that's not exactly the way we'd like it, but it's good enough. But there are certain policies that the courts have ruled that you must abide by when you are approving a project or implementing the plan in some way. And you'll know those by the language of the policy itself. This happened to be a case, I believe it was about infrastructure requirements. And the jurisdiction had decided that, well, we don't really need to worry about that right now. It's close enough. And the court ruled no. You said very clearly, you shall have, I don't remember the specifics of it, but you shall have these things before you approve a project. And the court overturned the county's decision to approve that. Not all policies have the same weight, but they all are supposed to be looked at as a whole. And I don't know if that answers your question or not, but hopefully it provides sort of an overview of how these policies, there is not one that says, okay, if it's been repeated 3 times, it means it's 3 times more important than
No,
another
I'm
one.
just anticipating arguments that may or may not come up at some point or from the future. When someone wants to emphasize something, they say, well, look, it's here, it's here, it's here, and it's here. The comeback is, kind of doesn't matter. If it's duplicated unnecessarily, that doesn't give it more weight.
Not necessarily, but I think that it could be, I mean, you know, everything's going to be argued in the future at some point in time over some project. What does this really mean? What was the intent of the county when this policy was adopted? And I could say that, could imagine that that argument could be made. Well, it was in the land use element, it was in the conservation element, it was in the resource production element. Obviously, this was very important to the county. And I think that that probably does have some logical basis to that kind of argument.
Okay, with that in mind, when I point to a duplication, I'm concerned with that issue.
Okay. And it would be good then to, you know, look at the other policies and say, is it different? Is it getting at something different, or is it really truly duplication? So when we get to those, we'll review that. So maybe I would suggest we go through the opening discussion, either section by section or just in, you know, as a whole, and then have some public comment. We can sort of just, you know, however, whatever kind of manageable bites the chair thinks is appropriate.
All right, well, maybe we'll see how it flows.
Yeah.
I did have a question. There is this italicized section, sentence that says, additional text added at the recommendation of the Agricultural Coalition. Is that, what is that, is it the
Those-
underlined parts or
Those
what?
italicized are my comments, just my notes in why the changes were made. So when we're done with this, all those italicized little comments will be eliminated.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I just wasn't sure where they were. They're just throughout.
Well, and it was really sort of the discussion above in the introduction section there and some of the changes that were made in this section. I tried to sort of locate those comments either right after or just before
Okay.
that change was made to try to explain why that change was
So the
recommended.
introduction is, you're saying is that the Ag Coalition provided some recommendations on how to clarify that and add
Right.
more, and
There were
that's,
some questions that were raised by the
Okay.
coalition, why are we
Okay.
looking at this? And there were some suggestions of how we might expand that discussion to clarify, so it's more understandable.
okay, thank you.
So, yes, I guess I should point that out, that where there are italicized sort of comments that are inset, those are my comments to help explain to you
Why things-
why that's there. And when we finish the edits, those comments will be
Right.
removed. It's not part of the plan itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So shall we just begin with the introduction, and then we'll see how far, you know, if this is, you know, how long these sections take before we, if we move right through them, then we'll take a couple of them and then have public comment, or if we're spending a lot of time, then we'll ask for public input.
Yeah, just kind of looking for a logical break point. I don't know that there is one.
Well, so let's just kind of go, let's just start in and see how much we are recommending some changes to the text. So, does anybody have any comments on the introduction?
Yes.
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 Shall I start?
That would be
Okay, in
fabulous.
the first sentence, it says, "The conservation and open space element provides policy direction for the conservation, development, and use of natural resources and the preservation of lands and waters devoted to or managed for open space uses." The last phrase, "limited to preservation," is not consistent with the statute, which includes open space used for managed production of resources, for recreation, for public facilities. So I think, to be accurate, it should say, "and the preservation and utilization of lands and waters devoted to or managed for open space uses."
Discussion of the commission on Mr. Wooster's recommendation of adding and utilization?
Where are you trying to put that at, Kelly?
In the first sentence, after the word preservation on the second line.
I'm good with that. It's coming.
Me also.
No problem there.
All right. I'm fine with that, too. So any other further comments on the introduction, Mr. Booster?
Yes.
Okay.
The second sentence says, "Open space as addressed in the California Government Code includes a wide range of land uses. These include land used for the following," and then there is a list that tracks pretty well the list in the statute, section 5560. What's left out, though, is in the introduction, because what the statute does, it defines open space land. And this just says open space. Defines open space land as land that's essentially unimproved and devoted to an open space use as defined in this section. That would be the list below. And here comes the critically important part that's left out. And that is designated on a local, regional, or state open space plan as any of the following. In other words, under this statute, to fall in the category of open space
Which
land,
part of 560 are you reading?
B.
B?
Bottom of the page.
Thank you.
And so if we're going to be describing what's addressed in the government code, I think we need to do something like, say, open space land as addressed in the California Government Code includes a wide range of land uses, because that's what the government code defines, open space land. And then it should say, these include land devoted to or designated by an open space plan as any of the following, and then the list would follow.
I agree.
Because otherwise, what you're doing is, you are essentially defining every piece of open space in this county as, quote, open space land, when it's not. And there are consequences from those depositions that follow in the government code.
I'm good with that, just inserting the open space land.
Well, I think you had some other language, open space land as defined. Isn't that what you recommend?
How it's designated.
See, these include land devoted to and designated by an open space plan as,
Tracking the language from the code.
correct, any of the following. And then the bullet point descriptions seem to be fine.
Right.
Commissioners'
It works for me.
discussion? Yeah?
Agreed?
Is there any issues that you have with this?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, too. Go ahead.
Okay, my last one.
Okay.
What follows the bullet point says, figure COS-1 identifies the existing open space lands in Calaveras County. Now, that could be taken to be the designation called for by the statute. I don't think it was intended as such, because the cover memo from the director says this is just for informational use. However, the way it's worded, somebody could take that to be the effect. I would suggest that we change that sentence so it accurately refers to what it's talking about, which is the map, along these lines. Figure COS-1 identifies various categories of existing natural resource protection, wherein federal, state, and private, comma, managed production of resources, comma, and recreation. Those are the categories in the map that we're referring to.
I'm just absorbing this, even, the map is called the open space map, right?
And it has categories specifically designated.
So could you read that again, Kelly?
Figure COS-1 identifies various categories of existing natural resource protection, paren federal, state, and private, and paren, managed production of resources, and recreation.
In Calaveras County.
Yes.
Fine with me.
Okay.
Good addition.
I'm good.
And I can't, maybe the public has some, can weigh in on this, and, not right this second, but it seems fine with me, too. Other comments? Anybody else have any comments on the introduction?
I think he pretty much picked up on, because I was looking at the government code as well, so I'm good with what the changes he's made. They work for me.
Anyone else on the introduction? No? All right, moving on to, if there's a discussion about the other general plan elements addressing conservation and open space related issues. So this is section acknowledging that there is, certainly overlap. I had a question on the first public facilities and services element, land accommodating floodwater and for groundwater recharge. Areas required for groundwater basin recharge. And then it's just supposed to say water supply?
Yes.
So the addressing conservation open space are in this public facilities and services element, it would be land accommodating floodwater and for groundwater recharge, areas required for groundwater, okay. So it's just a list.
Right. Those
Okay.
are the things that will be addressed in the
Okay.
public facilities and services element that are normally, they're listed as requirements to be addressed in the general plan.
So is there a difference between groundwater recharge and groundwater basin recharge?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So in areas where we actually have a groundwater basin, which is primarily just the very or northwest corner of the county, westernmost part of the
Okay.
county.
So
that's a
basin is
groundwater basin.
the key word there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And my recollection is that those were differentiated in the state law.
Okay.
Which is why they.
Okay. The only other comment I had was on the land use element. It just seemed that, after the underlined conserve and promote effective use of natural resources, that instead of preserving, it should be preserve and preserve the rural character of the county.
Can't quite hear you there, Fawn.
Oh, just not preserving, but preserve, it's like
Oh, form of the word?
yes,
Consistency of use.
yes. Does anyone else have any other?
Yeah, on that same sentence where it says the rural character of the county through clustering, infill, designing new development, I would like to see the word encouraging clustering, infill, and designing new development. It would go consistent with the other elements that we've worked on and using the word encouraging there.
I agree with that.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Give me your change again, please. I'm on the
So,
sentence.
Okay, and preserve the
Right.
rural character of the county through encouraging clustering, infill, and designing new development. Adding the word.
Correct.
And then I have a question following that. On Calaveras County Code does not sustain commercial fisheries, and therefore these are not addressed in the general plan. What if somebody decides to, or is there a possibility of that happening, and should we be addressing it for future? Do we want to just completely leave that out?
Well, I'm not sure what we would add. I mean, it doesn't prohibit someone from developing a commercial fishery of some
Okay.
sort, but it's not something that our county, we don't have any commercial fisheries right now, so it's not something that we're required to address.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's not going to prohibit from anybody in the future wanting to do something of that sort. Okay.
All right, maybe we'll move on to organization. You know, this is just how things are organized in the report. Are there any comments on that? Any element?
Not from me.
Not for me.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll try and get through water resources and water quality. Comments?
Not until page 5.
I have a question on page 3. The second paragraph under the heading groundwater deals with the eastern San Joaquin groundwater subbasin and the salt water coming in. And the last sentence says, saltwater bearing wells have been identified in the western portion of the county, primarily in the vicinity of Copperopolis. And my question is whether those salt-bearing wells are bearing salt because of intrusion from the eastern San Joaquin subbasin. And I have to say, I seriously doubt that's the case.
It's not. It is because of natural salts in the ground.
The way this reads, though, the reader would think that it is.
Contaminated.
It's coming, you would think it's coming from the delta. So what it should say is
what I thought.
something like,
That's what I thought too.
while not connected to the eastern San Joaquin groundwater subbasin, comma, and then continue with the sentence to make it clear.
Say that again.
Start the sentence with,
Although not connected to the eastern San Joaquin groundwater subbasin, comma, saltwater bearing wells have been identified, et cetera. Or you could put my modifying phrase at the end. It doesn't matter.
I'm good with you.
How about a separate sentence that says, this is unconnected to the saltwater basin and is a result of natural minerals in the soil or something along those lines?
That would be
that
fine.
That'd be
clarifies
good.
it.
All right. Other comments?
On page 4, but I think the planning director has already clarified this. There's a sentence that reads, "This document is provided as attachment A to the general plan technical background report." And I think I heard that that's coming. We don't have it yet.
I think, yeah, it's getting worked, revised, right? The technical background report.
Right, there were a number of issues that
Yeah.
were raised previously. Amy Augustine and I are working on that, and I hope to have that done and brought back to you at our the next portion of the general plan review.
Any other comments?
Under vegetation, just a question really, talking about the percentage of the county that's developed, and again, the percentage that's covered by orchards and vineyards, et cetera. There's no perspective on that, so can a perspective be added? How does our county compare with other similar counties? How am I to interpret what that 1% means, or what value to put on that, or how to read that? Follow me? I don't know if that's significant or insignificant, or we're way less developed than counties of similar size in our region, or less so, we have more or less ag than they do? You think it would be valuable to add a perspective on that? Otherwise, why put the number in there?
Yeah, I guess the reason the number is in there is to provide a perspective of, the overall altered landscape in the county, how that compares with other counties. I didn't feel it was
And maybe that would
important,
confuse the
but-
point, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it just, when I'm reading that, I think, my question is, okay, so what? How does that, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
I
I'm not
just-
sure where that, I'm sure we could track down that data, look at the same source of information that we got for this, and look at what other counties are. We could provide a additional table, maybe that would fit within the background report. So why don't I work on that? If
There
that's-
might already be one.
Probably not. I mean, the data is available, certainly. The source of this information is, available for all counties, and we could find a select number of counties of similar size and say, well, here's, just as a comparison, if the commission felt that was
I
appropriate.
think a table in the background report would be appropriate, so someone can look at that and say, how do we compare, and go back and look.
I don't know, I was fine with the 1%. It just, obviously it's,
That's what?
I said I was happy with, I was satisfied with just the 1%. Obviously, we're going to be higher than
Oh, no,
others and
I'm-
lower than others.
I'm
and-
not happy or unhappy with it.
Yeah.
I really don't care. I just want to
Yeah.
know, what's that mean to me?
Yeah.
If I look at a table from another county, I can say, oh, well, we're quite a bit more rural, or whatever the fact is.
Why don't I look and see how readily available that information is, and if it's, if it's going to take a huge amount of time to get that, it's probably not worth the effort.
I agree.
But if it's something that there's already a report that has that available, statewide, and I can pull out some, we can add something to the.
You didn't have to
background
crunch
report.
these numbers, right?
They were already provided for me
Yeah.
through a previous report that was included in the background report, the biological report that was an addition, an attachment to that report.
How old are these numbers?
Trying to remember when it was prepared, 2013,
13?
yeah.
So it wasn't information from a state table, from a state database, it was something from...
I don't know if the firm or the individual that prepared that report just drew that from some number or had to do a lot of research to get that. So if I can, let me find out, and if it's not a lot of extra work, I can certainly provide that, or,
And the background report's coming back to us?
yeah.
Okay.
But I would hope that if it's, if it's going to take a lot of time,
No, no,
that's not a
I
high
agree.
priority item. There
I
are other
agree.
things on my list that probably would, be better.
You're
time well
forgiven if
spent.
it takes a lot of time.
Okay.
I had a question on page 6 with the sensitive plant communities. Because the discussion of plant communities and types, that whole table is gone now, it just seemed of these generalized plant communities, what, of these, in reference to what? Was the table, the previous table talking about the sensitive plant communities? Because it says of these, I'm just wondering, of these generalized plant communities, and is it just referring to riparian woodlands, lone chaparral, and big tree forests?
This was referring then back up to this original, what I did was I sort of summarized this table in the change in this paragraph on the top of page 5. So that's referring then back to that sort of list of generalized categories of coniferous forest and so maybe that of these, maybe of the generalized communities provided in the technical background report and discussed above, these,
Something, I think, just to clarify, of these would be helpful.
You could simply say, of the generalized plant communities above, and it's in the above paragraph.
under species on page 6, there may be a bit of a glitch because the second to last sentence refers to the biological background report in italics. That was a defined term on page 4, but now it's not. And is that the same thing as attachment A?
Which is it, right?
And if it is, it would seem to me the last two sentences could be combined and just refer to attachment A.
Right. Good. Any other comments on this section? So before we get into the greenhouse gases, air quality, I thought maybe this might be a good time to get some public comment. Sound good? All right, so if there's anyone in the public would like to talk about the conservation open space element up to introduction, organization, associated plans and documents, and biological resources, up to middle of page 7. And just a reminder, please state your name for the record and make sure you sign in.
Kevin Wright, Agricultural Commissioner. On page 3 at the top, so, I think some of the statements in the first paragraph are a little bit misleading. And at the very least, I'd like to see where the background and the data for those particular statements come from. So at least something like that. For instance, the first sentence where it says mercury levels are a concern in the upper Stanislaus watershed and New Melones and Tulloch reservoirs. Now I'd like to see, I mean, if I was drinking the water from Tulloch Reservoir, I would like to know, where that information comes from and just how high are the levels. So just a reference to where that statement is made from. Is it from, I think it's from the fish, a study from fish which concentrates the mercury rather than from the drinking water itself. But I think if I was a citizen of the county, I'd like to know. And the other one is the last sentence. The State Water Resource Control Board lists the lower Stanislaus River as impaired due to excessive levels of diazinon, group A pesticides, and mercury. I was kind of wondering just how much of that concerns Calaveras County when only about 4 miles of the 25 or 30 mile stretch of that river is in Calaveras County itself. So perhaps that doesn't even apply to Calaveras County. Looking on my maps, I don't see where we have farmers who use much diazinon or group A pesticides. And so where these samples were taken from would be kind of important, because I kind of doubt that they were taken from the part of the river that flows through Calaveras County. This river flows all the way down through Oakdale and Modesto and all through those lower lands where there's much higher uses of these pesticides. And I think that this paragraph may strike more fear than is necessary into somebody who might be looking at Calaveras County. The other thing, when we were talking about the 1% that you had brought up about the 1% being vineyards or orchards or field crops, I don't think Calaveras County is, I think that information can be had, but your last sentence there, where they talk about other vegetation maintained by humans, well, vineyards, you see where I'm talking about?
Yep.
I think then you're talking about probably much more than 1% of the county, because other vegetation maintained by humans could incorporate most of all of SBI land for one, and then any place that there's humans who mow their grass, or you know what I'm saying? So, so if we're going to look at that, maybe we need to kind of define that a little bit better. And I think Peter was going to do that anyway, but, you know, there's comparisons, data comparisons put out by the state ag departments that compare all the counties and all their production. So we could come up with something that might give you a better reference. But the other vegetation maintained by humans is just kind of pretty broad.
If that, excuse me, but if that were to read, if you were to put a period at the end of field crops, that would make more sense to you?
Yeah.
Or other land, or your field crops or other lands under production,
Yeah,
ag
but-
production or something.
Well, I'd have to kind of go back and look at what my crop report data is and just the general map to kind of figure that out. And I don't know, Peter, where you got the 1%.
This
Whether
actually
you
came
would-
from the table that we've moved that's below, that's going to be
Did
moved
you
to the
count the
technical background
SBI?
report.
SBI property.
It doesn't include, you know, timberland.
It does.
Timberland would be in the coniferous forest classification. The language that was used in the bio report says it's land altered by human disturbance to the extent that a natural vegetative community no longer predominates. So it's primarily orchard, vineyard, you know, cropland. Could also include parkland
Golf
or
course?
develop a golf course, you know, something like that. That's, you know, it wasn't intended to include. So maybe we just use that phrase, you know, vegetation altered by humans. But then, you know, we're constantly altering the landscape, even if we're. I'm not sure how to address that, but I'm sure we could figure some way out to
Yeah, that's what I'm
clarify
saying.
that
Let's
language.
look
So
at it a
it's,
little.
yeah.
A
define it a little
tweaking,
bit.
yes, I agree.
And I think that's all I have.
Thank you.
Perhaps you could also add, maybe in the second sentence, you know, coniferous forests including timberlands or something like that, just so it's clear that that's included there.
Peter Rage, General Inn. I just got a request, and I don't know if it can be worked in or not. The idea of ignoring fish resources in this county, I just skimmed over it. There was no recommendation, pros and cons. I want to bring it to your attention. Down a couple of miles down here, San Joaquin County, there's a big fishery. And since we've got blessed with all these FEMA flood zones area, that might be able to some folks to look into the possibility of both for recreational and commercial possibilities of fisheries. We would not use any water, it would come in and go out. That was my impression. You don't retain water for any period of time. You got these tanks, small little fish eggs, they feed them, they grow up, certain amount, you let them go down to the ocean, and a whole bunch of them you can put into local lakes for sports fishing. I believe a fishing game give those little fishies free to put in the lake for recreational purposes. So there is a commercial and environmental benefits that may be mentioned that would be encouraged, especially in the flood zones, if there is flood zones that meet the requirement. The worst that can happen if you retain some surface water for fisheries is it might do some evaporation. But after that, why would anybody complain about it? There is a commercial and recreational benefit to have fisheries, and there we do have the resources to do it in this county. It was not really addressed, it's kind of ignored. But like where I live near Jenny Lynn, there's a big drain pipe down there, okay? It's a lake. There's a lake. I live on the top of the hill, drive, it's a big lake over there. Other than some poor suckers got stuck with paying a flood zone area, they could make use of it, both commercially and environmentally, to say, hey, you could have a fishery there. So instead of just ignoring it and throwing it out, is there a way to consider that you might want to encourage to look into it? It doesn't require anybody to do it, but it's there for the taking. I don't want to complicate anybody's life, but if somehow it can be worked in, you got nothing to lose by, hey, that might be feasible to have fisheries in this county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Vicki Reinke, Angels Camp, and Calaveras County Republicans. This, just in general, conservation open space element for us is an extremely important element because this expresses a lot of what you read in, I'm going to use the term Agenda 21 because I think people are starting to understand what that is, and that's government control by land use. So this is very scary to me. And so I hope as we go through this that the back of everybody's mind is how does this affect someone's private property? And Kelly, I appreciate your detail about how you see these elements because I think that you do see those things, and this helps make it more clear because this is the element that's going to bring in conflict with environmentalists that want to make sure that they can control what happens on people's lands. So anyway, that's just in general, and so I'm appreciating what I'm seeing being changed. A lot of the little notes I put on here have been addressed, so I think that's really good. So now to the details, there's a sentence in here that bothers me, and I would say it would bother our organization. On page 2, the last paragraph, generally, the one that's underlined, generally the water quality, and then it says occurs due to contact with pollutants. That happens when there are human activities. I would like to see that human activities taken out. I don't know why that's in there because, again, humans are just terrible, you know. They do terrible things. And actually, I think environmentalists appreciate that we would take that out because we have people going down our rivers in rafts. Well, people might think that's human activity that's affecting our rivers, so I would not want to see that ever taken away either. So anyway, I don't know, maybe I'm extra sensitive to these kind of words, but if you'd consider maybe taking that piece out of there and it would just read, with pollutants near water supplies. It's just open to whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things that can pollute besides humans' activities. And then just a comment on the 1%. When I read this and I saw the 1%, my reaction was, wow, we do have a lot of open space in Calaveras County. If only 1% of our land is developed, you know, that made me feel really good because I think we are concerned about open space here, but I don't think it's such a concern that we have to stop every development that ever comes through our county. So I thought that was, in general, a good thing. I didn't see it as being concerned about, you know, I don't know if that comparison has to be made, but anyway, I think it tells us we're pretty open space. And then the map that was with that, I appreciated that map because I've always wondered, and I've never taken the time to come up here and look at maps, but what properties are in ag preserves? You know, you saw huge amounts of property. Those are private properties. The owners of those properties have every right to make them ag, and I think, but to have that visual and to know that that's the case, sometimes I go, yeah, I guess we don't really need to be complaining too much about the rural and open space in Calaveras County. So we just have to make sure that we protect the rights of those people who own those properties and that they, you know, if they want to keep them in ag preserve, then that's great and that keeps open space. But if they choose someday to sell their property and want to develop it, that needs to be open as well. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lou Mayhew. I wanted to comment on the groundwater section, starting on page 3. I agree with some previous comments that certainly where it talks about the Stanislaus River and pollutants, that I think it needs to be more sensitively referenced, because I suspect that's may not even be in our county. On the groundwater portion, it seems to me that it's missing some very important information, and that has to do with the eastern San Joaquin subbasin. It does not mention the Valley Springs Formation, which is the oldest portion of that. And that is very old water. There are, I think, 4 studies. Two studies are not mentioned at all. One is a USGS CCWD study that was done in 2011. The other was a Dunn report done for CCWD that also looked at the same wells that the USGS study did. They found that the water on the eastern edge by these monitoring wells, the USGS study found it was between 2,200 and 13,400 years old and not being recharged. There's something about the geology out there, it's not being recharged, and that was a startling finding. The Dunn study found that it was between 5,400 years old and 18,900 years old. That's old water not being recharged. I think you need to reference that in the text of your groundwater. Here's just some written comments on that. I also have a CD that has those studies on it, and I have paper copies as well. So I think at least a paragraph that's a little more sensitive to what really is happening in that eastern San Joaquin Basin, the Valley Springs Formation, the age of the water, the lack of recharge, and the difficulty in finding recharge sites. That was a major charge of the studies to look for. And there may be some, but it would take a good bit more research to find them. So in sum, I think you can say that we're mining ancient water in that part of the county. That may have some implications for perhaps keeping large parcels large rather than allowing them to be subdivided. Anyway, water use. I think it missed that, and I hope that that could be corrected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just didn't want to interrupt that. Colleen Platt with MyValleySprings.com. I had basically wanted to start at the beginning with the introduction with the open space map and the description of the map and what open space is in that area. I'm kind of a map person, so I tend to focus on maps and what they show and what they represent. And so I was reading the introduction and then the bullet points defining open space lands. And right underneath that, of course, is the reference to the map where it says figure COS1 identifies existing open space lands with the additions that Kelly suggested, which I can't remember. But anyway, the map, when you look at it, it identifies some of the open space lands. It doesn't identify all of them that are listed there. So I just thought that should be a little bit of a qualifier there. If you look at the bullet points above, when you're describing the open space lands, okay, the first one, preservation of natural resources, wildlife habitat, rivers, streams, aquatic resources. We've talked about conservation easements. On this map, some conservation easements are shown, some are not. And those conservation easements are for the preservation of wildlife habitat, many of them. And I just wanted to make sure this got into the record that we are missing conservation easements on that map. I believe Ms. Zeller sent you some pretty detailed information of conservation easements in the Salt Springs Valley. Over 7,000 acres in that area is in a wildlife preserve in the Salt Springs Valley, and that's not shown on the map. So either we should say we're showing some of this information, or we should make sure the information is all shown on the map. So that's the first thing that's not shown. On the second bullet point, the managed production of resources, including forest rangeland and ag lands, important for the economic production of food and fiber, et cetera. Are all of the food production, important food production lands shown on this open space map, or just the ones that are in Williamson Act? It seems to me not all resource production ag lands are in Williamson Act. So if we're, it describes open space lands as the lands important for economic production of food and fiber and major mineral deposits, which those aren't shown on here either. And some of the ag lands aren't shown on here that are being used for production. So I'm not saying they have to be. I'm just saying if you're going to say this map shows all open space lands, then it either should show all of that, or it should say it shows some of it, and for the rest of it refer to other sources. That's my point on that. And then bullet point number 4, the protection of, this is again describing open space lands, the protection of public health and safety, including floodplains, areas presenting high fire risks. Again, these are considered open space lands. They're not shown on this map, which is fine. It'd be a lot to show on this map. But I'm just saying, if you're going to say this map shows all these things, then you should put a qualifier that it shows it in another map in another place maybe, or take that off the list, or just clarify that somehow, because somebody like me reading this is going to look at the map and go, where? And it's not there. So the floodplains aren't shown, the high-risk fire areas aren't shown on the map. And also, I'm not sure about this category of under the legend, it says other publicly owned lands. I noticed that, for example, Valley Springs Public Utility District, CCWD lands are not shown. And I would think those would be considered publicly owned lands. So wouldn't those need to be shown on this map also? So basically, those are my big concerns about the map, because I'm a map person and I like them to be accurate, because I go to a map for information. So I guess I'm saying either make the map more inclusive to reflect actually what is listed that is supposed to be shown on it, or put qualifiers in there where you might find this information that's not shown on that map. And again, I think it's just really important that all the conservation easement land in the county be shown. And there may be a difficulty doing this. The tax assessor may not have the current information, but it's important, and it's lands that are open space permanently. They cannot be developed, unlike Williamson Act lands, which are temporary. Those can come out of Williamson Act, so those aren't permanently open space lands. Conservation easements are. And if we're missing at least 7,000 acres here, I think we need to make get some of those big figures in there for accuracy. That's my biggest point. I think there was one other thing. On page 3, it starts on 2, talking about surface water. Okay, so we're under surface water. I didn't see any mention of the Calaveras River in here. There's mention of the Stanislaus and the Mokelumne, and I didn't see any mention of the Calaveras River. The only reason I bring this up is that I do believe we do have some water quality issues. That's my water source, and CCWD, I talked to people and I've seen their reports, and I know that we have at least a manganese issue, and there may be other issues, and I thought maybe CCWD ought to be contacted just to get some sentence in there dealing with Calaveras River, because it's...
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
You're suggesting that reference to the Calaveras River be included in the context of what? It's in paragraph 2 under surface water. Where else did you think it was appropriate?
Under water quality, under paragraph 3, you start this plan starts talking about the water quality of the surface water.
What page are you on?
On
Well,
2,
you're on-
moving into 3.
Yeah, page 2 and 3, right?
Yes, you were starting to say that Calaveras River was mentioned in paragraph 2, which it is. But my point is, in paragraph 3, we start talking about the water quality of the surface water, and after that point, the Calaveras River is not mentioned as far as water quality that I've seen.
Okay, so
Okay.
you believe there's a table somewhere that shows that
I would like to see it mentioned in water quality, because I do think there are some water quality issues, as every area has certain issues with minerals and things, and I've talked to Bill Purley and people at CCWD, and they have to put special filters in for manganese. That's what I've been told for the last 10 years, so. It's not a life or death issue, but it has to be dealt with for the safety of their drinking water. So it just seems to me it warrants a sentence in here addressing the water quality of the Calaveras River. And then the only other question I haven't had time to research it. I just, getting back to the 1%. We're back to that page 5 and all the 1% figures keep getting thrown out here. And I also would like to see what the basis of these 1% figures are. It just seems a little broad and vague. When you say 1% of the county is defined as land altered by human disturbance to the extent natural vegetation no longer predominates. I'm a map and a visual person. When I look at an aerial photo of the county, I see a lot more than 1% of the land that's been disturbed from its natural vegetative state through, human intervention through one way or the other, whether it's grading or vineyards or pastures or houses or roads or whatever. There's a lot more than 1% that's been disturbed from its natural vegetation. I'm just wondering how they came up with that figure. That just doesn't, without any basis in that, I can't really accept that without any data behind that. So I'd just like to see that explained a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on these sections of the element?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Bob Garamendi, representing the Ag Coalition. Want to endorse the suggested changes that Kelly was proposing. I think they help to clarify what we're trying to say there. I would like to bring in on the bullet points under introduction, second bullet point where it talks about resource production, and it has the term major mineral deposits, and then later down under resource production element again, in the next set of bullet points, it uses the term major again, and I don't know if that can become problematic later as to what would determine a major mineral deposit over just mineral deposits. the county has a tremendous amount of minerals, and whether it's determined to be major or not, I'm not sure what that would mean. And on the water quality issue, I didn't see it in here, but a lot of the pollutants or contaminants that are mentioned, a lot of those are naturally occurring, and I would think it would be important to maybe reference that they aren't only human caused, but they're naturally occurring whether we were here, we as humans, or not.
Can you give us an idea about some of those?
Well, I'm aware that there, some years ago, there was a lawsuit with CAL FIRE, the CDF at the time, SPI, and the State Water Resource Control Board, I believe. And it was about nitrates in the McCalamy. And they were saying the logging operations and CAL FIRE's lack of enforcement of regulations caused a lot of that. East Bay Mud was involved actually in that.
How would logging contribute to nitrates?
Soil movement, nitrites, I'm not a, but that was the main.
That was the argument?
Argument.
Okay.
And what they found is that throughout the mother lode and throughout the course of that river, with tributaries and that there's a large amount of naturally occurring nitrates. Does anybody know nitrates, nitrites? But that had nothing to do with human activity. It's just the natural progression of breakdown in the soils and that.
I think it's nitrate.
I thank you. The other one would be cryptosporidium, for example. I know I'm personally aware of this because of the cattle are blamed for some of the cause of these. It's a pathogen, but it's naturally occurring as well. All mammals carry it, as well as humans, and whether it be ground squirrels, coyotes, deer. And so it's just there's a natural occurrence of these contaminants that I couldn't begin to tell you the levels, but it does happen, and I think it's important that we all realize that there is, that this does occur.
Well, you referenced a suit. What was the upshot of the suit?
Well, it was found that most of what was being done was naturally occurring of that particular problem, and the state was found to be clear as far as their enforcement of the regulation. Their lack of enforcement wasn't causing this degree. And there's throughout, Ted probably knows better than I, numerous minerals and metals that are in our system that are naturally occurring. So.
Thank you.
If I could point out on the bottom, the last phrase on the second paragraph of page 3 says exactly that.
Whereabouts?
Second paragraph, page 3, associated with both natural conditions and man-made activities. Maybe that should be human activities. Man-made.
Where are you?
Second paragraph, page 3,
Second paragraph.
last sentence.
That's
right.
limited to the
okay.
McCallamy. That comment's limited to the McCallamy. I think Mr. Garamendi's comments were broader than that.
Well, and also Colleen's, that it might affect other rivers as well. That gets at her comment, too.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. What I'd like to do is just like...
Bonnie.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Bonnie.
We were asking the difference between nitrate and nitrite. the definition of nitrite is a salt of nitrous acid containing the monovalent negative radical NO2, an uncharged ester of this acid, whereas you look at nitrate, it says a salt of nitric acid containing the monovalent negative radical NO3, an uncharged ester of this acid, and number 2 is potassium nitrate or sodium nitrate used as a fertilizer. So I think, I'm not a chemist either, but it sounds like the nitrite is the naturally occurring substance, and the nitrate might be something that is introduced through fertilizing or the human intervention.
Thank you very much.
That's all I can ask.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all right. Bring your dictionary next time, Bob. Okay. So what I'd like to do is just kind of address the issues that were brought up by everyone, and I've kept a list. So maybe we could start with that, and because there are just some overlaps. But the first one was Mr. Wright, the Ag Commissioners, on page 3, the discussion about mercury levels, and, you know, is this going to strike fear in the people? What's the source, the references? Do we know the levels? You know, and that qualifiers that there's only 4 miles of the Calaveras River included in the county. Sorry, Stanislaus, right. Do you have any thoughts on this, Mr. Maurer?
I can certainly try to track down that information and determine whether or not they were looking at part of the river outside the county.
The language in there references the Murphy's water treatment plant from the Stanislaus, so there looks to be a portion of that is in our county.
But
That's not the lower. The lower Stanislaus is below.
below our county. Right?
So where are they pointing that out at?
That's the very last part of the
sentence.
sentence, where they mention the lower.
I think Bob's comment, he can correct me if I'm wrong, is that if indeed those levels of diazinon were recorded down, you know, way past our county, that maybe that sentence doesn't even belong in this paragraph.
Right.
And I would agree with that.
I think it certainly could use some further investigation and research into the, you know, does it apply to us? And that would also include Colleen's comment about having to do with the Calaveras, the water quality, I think. It's just looking into that as well.
Well, there was also, going back to Bob, he was talking about including reference to which components of these, I'll call them pollutants, include, well, which components of these include naturally occurring? How much, which of these pollutants are also naturally occurring? Not that you're trying to make a numerical distinction between how much of it's natural and how much of it's caused by human activity, but if naturally occurring levels of mercury, for example, exist, then, and not just in the McCollumney, but then that should be mentioned, or as well as the other, any other factor that can be naturally occurring.
I like that too. I think that naturally occurring needs to be defined in there somehow.
And you know, you might, I don't know, maybe a little insert in here as to known naturally occurring levels of the following components exist in the rivers in Calaveras County. Boom, to boom, to boom, to boom, and you don't try to quantify any of them, just that they're there.
But I think the state code.
Some could be naturally occurring or caused by people like arsenic.
Sure.
Oh, no, I know, there can be both. There can be both, but that's understood. There can be both. I thought it was.
Maybe a modification of the first line in the last paragraph on page 2, where we say that, some impairment occurs due to contact with pollutants that occur naturally or associated with human activities, something along those lines. So we just generally address that concern. I can see what data is available to see if there's a list that we could either add here or to the background report of all of those substances.
If you footnoted it right there with that little insert that you just talked about, that would direct people to the information that they would need, correct?
Well, I think that ties into Vicki Renzi's comment.
Right.
I do too.
Because it's true that some of these so-called pollutants are naturally occurring, and the way it read, it's limited to where there were human activities, which I do think should come out, because it's not correct.
So when she said pollutants near water supplies versus that human activities, I would want to pull that too. I would be good with that, and then doing the clarification on the naturally occurring.
So we're saying that you want to add that occur naturally and then delete any reference to human activity?
I mean, it's not just humans, it's animals too, I mean, it's like
It's
what...
a lot of things.
Right, but primarily it's humans and
Well, it's both.
animals.
I mean,
Primarily,
there
it's
are,
not. Primarily, it's natural occurring contaminants that are in our water. It's not
Well, I don't know that we're giving a percentage, like we can say one's bigger than the other one, but I think it's important to have it in there that there are impacts due to development, and those are mostly people and animals.
Well, if you take the second sentence, last paragraph on page 2, and strike the phrase, "It happens when there are human activities," and then if you add something that makes it clear that
it could be all.
these contaminants are both caused by humans and naturally occurring, then I think you'd be good.
Then I can live, I like that.
Me too.
So how would it read, Kelly?
I would strike the phrase, "That happens when there are human activities." It's in the second sentence, bottom paragraph, page 2. And then I would add something at the end that's been suggested to make it clear that at least some of these pollutants are naturally occurring.
And human.
I'm working
Doing
on
both,
that.
Vaughn, adding both words.
I must be like really
I got it, just a second.
dense today. So- No, I'm just like, so it would say, are we talking about that generally the water quality of the county surface water supply is good, period?
Correct.
Yes.
However, some impairment occurs to contact with pollutants.
Near water supplies.
Pollutants near water supplies,
Both by human and naturally occurring.
both by human and naturally occurring.
You can either do it there or you can do it at the end, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
And Mr.
all right.
Tino was working on some
Okay.
language for us.
Okay. Striking happens when there are human activities near water supplies, and inserting, striking, that include both naturally occurring pollutants and those introduced by human activities.
So if you started with however, would it just,
Can you read the
however?
full sentence?
Read the whole sentence,
okay,
yeah,
sure.
thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure where we're inserting.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. However, some impairment occurs due to contact with pollutants that include both naturally occurring, well, pollutants is not duplicated, that include both those that are naturally occurring and those that are introduced by human activities. That was sloppy. Want me to do it again?
No. Well, I got it, but go ahead and do it again.
If you could read again so I could write it down.
Yes.
Just because you like to hear my voice.
Yes.
However, some impairment occurs due to contact with the pollutants that include both those that are naturally occurring and those that are introduced by human activities.
Okay.
Maybe it's as well as, instead of and, as well as.
It's redundant.
As well as instead of the and.
I'm pretty good with the and, too.
It doesn't really
Yeah.
change the
Yeah, the intent,
meaning of the sentence.
right. So we good with that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
You're taking issues by speaker, not by page, aren't you?
I am. That's how
Okay.
I wrote them down.
Whatever your organization
Okay,
is.
thank you.
Before we leave this, though,
Yes,
and this was not brought up by a speaker, but it's suggested
Okay.
by comments. The second paragraph on page 3 that talks about the Upper McCallum River watershed, water quality concerns can include turbidity, alkalinity, aluminum, nitrate, and pathogens, each found in elevated levels throughout the watershed. I have a little trouble believing that one, because the watershed actually goes clear to the top of the Sierras. And in Calaveras County, I think it includes Salt Springs Reservoir. And there's not a whole lot goes on above there. In fact, there's no logging above there.
well, I see that the source was a report.
So I would just suggest that be checked for accuracy, because it does
Yeah.
not sound right to me.
Yeah, and that kind of gets at Mr. Wright's comments as well, about this whole sort of 2 paragraphs here, is sort of checking the accuracy and citing sources.
Yes.
Is turbidity really a water quality concern? I mean, don't the fish like that?
No, I don't think so.
Not necessarily.
They don't?
No.
Isn't that how they breathe?
No, that's like sand and
No,
silt,
turbidity
that's
is
like
silt
after the,
and-
yeah.
Oh, you're
silt and
talking about
sand.
turbidity, you're probably talking about suspended solids.
Right.
Yeah, in the
Oh.
water,
It's what happens when it rains.
yeah.
It's man-made rain.
All right, going through the list again, what, my list here was Mr. Ray said this fact about ignoring fisheries. And, my feeling is that it's, we had the discussion, it doesn't really ignore fisheries. We're not promoting fisheries by the fact that we're not addressing it, and this element doesn't exclude someone from
Coming up with a great
pursuing-
idea for a fish farm.
Right.
So the language of the state law says that we're to address open space used for the managed production of resources, including bays, estuaries, marshes, rivers, and streams that are important for the management of commercial fisheries. So.
And we don't have any,
There's
so,
nothing for us to
right.
manage at this
Right.
point. So while it doesn't preclude the ability to, now arguably you could say that the upstream water that flows into the San Joaquin and the bay is a part of the management of commercial fisheries.
So does that sentence even have to be in there? Because it kind of struck me as odd, and I'm surprised Peter and I agree on something, but it struck me as odd that it was almost an impression of, we don't really have fisheries or want them. I don't know why it struck me that way.
Was it to check off, like, that we weren't ignoring them? Was
Right.
that it
Well,
wasn't
the
like
intent
we're...
was to say the reason
Yeah.
why there's nothing
In
on
here.
commercial fisheries in here is because we have none.
It wasn't very long ago, didn't we have one up on the
Calaveras
west
County
side,
does
right?
not sustain commercial fishing.
Well, an individual,
Yeah.
what was that, like a fish farm that was up there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that
Commercial
rises
operation.
to the level of a commercial fishery. We're talking about coastal counties, counties along, say, the Sacramento River, where the fishing industry is a key component of the economy, and that ensuring that the management of those resources is, ongoing to, maintain that, that portion of the economy is of higher importance than it would be to, say, Calaveras County. We could strike it. The fact that if it like sort of raises questions and flags, then, it's not necessary to have it. It was more of just explanation.
Can we just say at the end of that, Calaveras County is not opposed to fisheries? I don't know why it bothers me. I mean, I'm the only one, so it doesn't.
I'm fine either way. I mean, we could leave it out, and if somebody says, hey, you didn't address it, we could
I mean, that's
explain
what
then
I'm
at that
worried
time.
about, is if we don't address it, then we're going to get slapped for it and say, well, why didn't you address that? That's part of the state process of addressing this element. So it has to be in there, I think, right?
That was my feeling.
I get that.
We should have some statement that, if we want to explain it more, that, there are, obviously sport fishing activities. We could have small-scale commercial fishing, but we don't,
How
have.
about you insert the word currently?
Oh, that makes me happy.
Okay, done.
That was good.
Okay.
All right. The next comment was, I think we covered Vic.
Excuse me, Fawn, but did we get to the second paragraph in page 3 about referencing the upper Moke only at the exclusion of other rivers?
I don't think we've gotten to that comment
I
yet.
thought that was a Bob comment.
Well,
Well,
we haven't
we-
gotten
we
to Bob's
did.
comment yet.
We did when we changed the paragraph at the bottom of 2.
Oh, the naturally occurring and,
Okay.
okay. I believe we covered Vicki Ranke's comment about human activities.
Say what again?
Human activities, we already went through that amendment.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mayhew had a comment about the eastern San Joaquin subbasin that Valley Springs is a portion of, with really old water that's not getting recharged. Is that?
Nothing was
So my understanding is that the Valley Springs Formation is a separate
Yeah.
underground source of water that
It's
is
not
being tapped.
eastern.
It's not part of the eastern San
Correct.
Joaquin groundwater basin,
Correct.
which is a sort of alluvial type of groundwater basin that's much broader than that. I'm not familiar with the studies. I look forward to seeing what he presented, and if we can add a paragraph that discusses that, I'd be happy to do so. I don't know what other water formations there are in the county.
I think
I could certainly talk to Brian Moss.
He has a very good map on it.
And he really understands groundwater issues in the county, and see if there's additional language we could add to this that would have a broader discussion of groundwater issues. Not sure that it affects the policy language at all, but it's certainly, valuable information to have.
But for clarification, does not the eastern edge of the San Joaquin Basin, that's in our Wallace area, not in the Valley Springs Basin that we're talking about here?
Yes, it's that very far western part of the county.
Right. We just barely kind of clip it.
Yeah. That and down towards where Highway 26.
Right.
Jane Lynn area.
Linden, yeah.
Peter Raz just said that Brian Moss has a really good map of the waters,
He made a presentation
and
weeks ago.
maybe we could get a copy of that and let us all look at it. If we like it, we can add it to this just to be able to reference those
Or in the
waterways.
technical background
Or
report.
in the technical
Yeah.
background report would be even better.
Sure, whatever we have that's information that's valuable, we can certainly add it. I'll work with Brian to see what information is available.
Well, and maybe in your discussion with him, you could just address some of these, discussion about, the source and levels of some of these contaminants in the upper Stanislaus watershed, and, just sort of like address those couple of paragraphs that are causing people some.
I know that he reviewed this section.
Okay.
And, part of this, his
Just
input.
refer to Brian Moss's PowerPoint presentation as to where they could find it. I mean, that's an excellent presentation.
All right,
So,
okay. Are we, any other, okay, we're moving on. Colleen Platt had some points that she made about the map, that it's only identifying some of the open space lands, doesn't include all the conservation easements, and that the bulleted list of what is considered open space is not on the map, so either changing the description about what the map details or providing a more detailed map.
Well, we did change the description of what the map contains. We fixed that.
Okay, so that was your comment in the very beginning, which said, Kelly? Going back to that, and that was open space land as addressed in the government code includes a wide range of land uses. These include,
Where we talked about figure COS-1, we changed So it doesn't read identifies the existing open space lands in Calaveras County. We changed that to refer specifically to what the map does identify. And so the text does not purport to say that the map identifies all open space uses.
So it
doesn't.
says that identifies, and I don't know if I got all this right, various categories of existing natural resource
Protection, federal, state, and private, managed production of resources and recreation,
Just
which
right
is
from
what
the,
it does.
right from the legend.
Right straight from the map.
Now, if there's additional information regarding land that's under conservation
Right.
easement that I didn't have, I got the data from the assessor's office. And if there's lands that there's conservation easement that's not shown on that map, by all means, we can fix that.
Well, I can speak to some of that. Of these 7,100 acres in Salt Springs Valley, at least 4,535 is also under the Williamson Act. And so you could put it under either one, because it's both.
And maybe it's included under,
It's shown as Williamson
Yeah.
Act, which it is. It also is CE. The other 2,000 or 3,000, whatever, I do not know. But I think her point was that the easements are different than the Williamson Act, and so
they're permanent.
if one is covered by both, perhaps it would be more informative to show it as an easement rather than Williamson Act, if I understand what she's saying.
Right.
So,
I
and
think
and
it
it
would
could
be
be
more
that
accurate,
the
so
way the computer graphics shows, once, they're all layers, and the top layer is going to show. And so maybe we reverse that layering system. I'll work with GIS on that if there's overlap on that. But again, if there's lands that's, that's white on the map, and there's a conservation easement or there's some other inaccuracy, yeah, let's correct it. So, I know I received an email from Muriel Zeller identifying some parcels, not specifically, but other than that there was, some, several thousand acres that she felt wasn't included in this. And if someone give me some more specific information that provides more detail, happy to add that.
The land you're talking about, Mr. Wooster, is that an aberration that it's dual designations? It has these both restrictions?
I don't know.
I wouldn't say it an aberration. I think it's probably, it could happen elsewhere. And I think that particularly with agricultural lands that have a conservation easement could also be in the Williamson Act. It's probably, not uncommon.
If that's a matter of your layering,
I'll check that and see.
because it would be more accurate in my mind to designate it as the conservation easement, because then that's the permanent designation, it's not going to go away.
Yes.
I suspect it's not an aberration because for tax purposes, the Williamson Act is a well-known and customary way of adjusting the taxes to reflect the agricultural value of the property. A conservation easement by statute is entitled to the same kind of tax treatment, but I don't know that everybody knows that.
No, I was going to ask that question today. Thank you for answering it already. With no quid pro quo.
Correct.
So the map, what it doesn't address, what I think Colleen was also getting at, was scenic highway corridors, if we had any floodplains, high fire risk areas, other categories of open space, potentially open space land that aren't in a natural, not conservation easement or an ag preserve or under public ownership or a park.
So we have other maps in the other elements or in the background reports that identify some of those other types of
Can we
and the
just do a
safety element
reference to
under
those
the-
in the background report where they can find that further information?
Well, we sort of do that in the next list, the bulleted list of where other conservation open space, and we want to add, expand that sentence that says, you know, specifically points to where we could find that information, you know, that might be appropriate.
So that would be where, Peter?
So for example, you know, the floodwater, you know, the floodplains are shown in the technical background report under public facilities and services. Or we address, at least we address that there. I can't remember if it's under safety. High fire hazard areas are under safety, obviously. So we have that information. It's just not shown on this map, because anything, you know, if we add anything more to it, it's going to be too confusing.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't add more to it as much as I would just reference, because you've got this bullet list that should match up to the map, and it's not. So if we could say there's...
It's not everything is on the map.
Right, but there are other maps, so if we could just say in the background report, this map references the flood or the fire, you can just, since the maps are already created, we don't need to keep layering. This just gave us a overview of what we were looking at, but you could reference those other maps in the background report just so quick reference can happen.
Okay, I can do that.
Well, and even the land use map, because as Colleen also pointed out, that there could be certainly other essential food and fiber production resource areas that aren't in a conservation easement or a Williamson Act.
I think it gets back to the edits that Commissioner Wooster suggested, the very first part where we say, these include lands devoted to, let me read my scribbles here, by an open place, open to and designated by an open space plan. There are other lands that are currently used for open space. I don't know that we have the ability to go out there and categorize every one of them and say,
As
okay,
open
all of
space.
this is
Right,
being,
right.
but these are the ones that are currently designated under the Williamson Act
Okay.
program as resource production lands and therefore open space. They're, you know, under TPZ.
Right.
You know, they've been somehow raised, you know, a higher level of designation of open space by, you know, participating in a program or having a conservation easement or being managed by a public agency. Sure, we have other lands out there that are currently open and they're being used for resource production. So I think that provides that differentiation. I don't know that we can, you know, every
No,
single piece of
that's
property in
not
the county
suggesting
is-
that,
I
right.
think it just goes beyond our capabilities.
Right, good. So just identifying or making reference that not all open
Yeah,
space is
but
on
I
this
can be
map.
specific as to where those other types of
Are
open space
addressed.
categories are addressed and where they can be found in the
Good.
background report.
All right, are we good with that? Yeah, okay. Let's see here. So have we addressed Colleen's other comment about the Calaveras River and the water quality issues that kind of go to that whole section, these two paragraphs that you're going to talk with Mr. Moss about?
Mr.
On
Howard,
page
those are
3?
complete, I think we have.
Yes, I think that with some edits, we can make sure that it's a broader discussion of all the rivers and if there's any issues associated with those. I mean, this discussion, you know, has sort of evolved from, you know, from the submittal of an interior report, edited by my predecessor several times, subsequently edited again by me, and that's where we're at. I don't know the full background of all of this data and how it sort of came, you know, I assumed it was accurate.
Right.
I know that, for example, the short paragraph on the McCollum River was based on a specific study done for the McCollum River. That's referenced in footnote number 4. Do we have a similar study for the Calaveras River? Probably. Can I track it down? I think that, you know, Bob is shaking his head no, so maybe not. So, you know, we're basing this on trying, you know, factual data that we have on studies that have previously been done. If there's something from CCWD that identifies that there's manganese in the water, that there's some report that was, you know, I can add that and reference it as well.
Well, I think CCWD will have information on that because they supply the water to Sheep Ranch, which they pump out of San Antone Creek, which is part of the Calaveras and which does have issues.
So CCWD Also had opportunity to review this. I got extensive comments from CCWD. That was not something that they raised. So we can move on. But I'll track down what I can to expand that discussion and try to be
Or
as
just clarify it, or...
accurate as
yeah.
we can.
Okay. The other issue that Mr. Garamendi brought up was basically, how do you define major for the mineral deposits? You know, what constitutes major?
That's the term that's used in the statute. I would refer back then to the state maps that we have in the background report that identify where.
There are major mineral
Yeah,
deposits.
Then the state classifies mineral deposits under a very complex MRZ 2, 2A, there's a whole bunch of different classifications, and they consider some to be important and some to be less important. I would guess that those important ones would be what they consider major. It's not defined anywhere in statute, so.
They don't, the legend doesn't say major.
No, they use a different.
Uses different
Different
words.
terminology. But the laws associated with mineral resources sort of clearly identify that these are the ones that are important at the state level. And those maps are included in the background report. One of the things that we still need to do with the final version of the land use map is identify where those are. That needs to be shown on that map. So all those pieces should come together. We have that information.
Just looking at the government code that we were given under the conservation element, 65302D, as I read it, it just says minerals. It doesn't say major minerals, does it?
I'm looking at B2 and the list of open space used for managed production of resources, including, and then it says, and areas containing major mineral deposits, including those in short supply. Oh. 65560.
So I think there'll be further, clarification down the road, so I think it's fine to, I'm okay with mimicking the state's
Do you
statute.
think because it's only referencing the majors in this part of the report is why they only picked up some of the rivers, the others aren't major concerns like the ones that are in this report?
Well, the term majors as it applies to mineral resources. I don't
Right.
think that the call for water used that same term.
Well, this is getting pretty technical, but you're looking at 65560, which is the open space one. But if you go to the conservation one, it doesn't use the word major, and we're both conservation and open space here. And so I don't know where we come out on this one. But if the word major is going to cause a problem, then we would be consistent with the conservation element statute by taking it out.
That's true.
I recommend we take the word major out.
Where in the conservation are you pointing to? Oh, up here in the text, not the bullets.
And D, D1.
The text is the mandatory stuff.
Right.
The bullets is the optional stuff.
Take it out.
We can certainly just delete major from that second bullet. I mean, at some point in time, we have to.
Nothing defined, it'd be better not to have it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll strike major.
Whatever, fine.
Wasn't it, there were two majors? And I'm trying to remember what page this was on.
Page 1, halfway down the page.
Right. Was there only one major?
No, there's two.
There's two majors, right? Where was the other one?
The second bullet point above. In the first group of bullet points, the second one. Also the second one in the lower point, lower group.
Major mineral.
Oh, okay, yeah, in the second bullet for each of that list. Areas containing major mineral deposits.
Okay, all right. That was all of the public comment I had. Did I miss anybody?
No, you got it.
Okay. On this, it's up to you guys. Sure.
I just have one little thing, not to belabor the point or beat a wordsmith to too much, but
Could you wait till you get to the podium? We don't want the public to miss anything you're saying.
it's just going back to the fisheries, and I...
Kevin, could you please restate your...
Kevin Wright.
Thank
the
you.
Ag Department. Just to go back to the fisheries for a second, I know that it's stuck in the craw of some other people, or there's a little point of concern of maybe why that wasn't possibly a good sentence. And I also think it's not a good sentence, mainly because of the word sustain. It says Calaveras County does not sustain commercial fisheries. When you think about it, Calaveras County sustains a huge amount of fisheries because the water that comes from our rivers flows down through the Stanislaus, the Calaveras River, and the Mokelumne River, and those sustain, all, just a huge population of salmons. They spawn in those rivers. And so rather than have sustain there, Calaveras County doesn't have any commercial, so just remove sustain and put have, and say Calaveras County does not have a commercial fisheries.
Or as previously...
But our waters do sustain
Right.
a large part of...
Yeah, that's a good point. So it would be currently, we'd already added, does not currently have any commercial fisheries.
Well, his suggestion would be delete currently and delete sustain and insert have.
Yeah, but I think currently is still
Yeah,
good.
it
Does
should
not
be currently
currently,
have.
does not currently have.
Currently.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I would feel better about it, but we just need to recognize that our waters are important to the
Yeah,
rest
no,
of
that's I think that's a good point. Good point.
And then it should say, this is not, rather than these are not.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Wow, now we've got a
Wait.
whole list of...
Mr. Dean was first there?
Yeah, Bob Dean, again. When you're talking about naturally occurring pollutants, I would say, given the geology of Calaveras County, you should preface that with the word substantial.
You should do what?
Substantial.
Substantial, because we have, through this mother lode belt, huge deposits of serpentine which carry lots and lots of heavy metals. A good example is over when they constructed Mountain Oak School on Pooh Station Road. There were all kinds of special considerations that had to be made just by virtue of the fact of the dust associated with asbestos and things like that. And now the kids who want to do gardening there cannot dig a hole to plant a plant because of the serpentine. And whether you may consider this to be an excessive issue or not, the point nonetheless remains that we do have substantial pollutants in our soils and rocks that are naturally occurring. Certainly exacerbated by the legacy mining from the gold rush era. A case in point is the Penn Mine on the Mokelumne. That cost East Bay Mud, I think, close to $20 million just to mitigate some of the issues, and they still have to monitor it very closely. Another case in point is the Meridian Bearcat Mine over by Copperopolis.
The what?
Meridian Bearcat Mine over by Copperopolis. They were under a cease and desist order for a number of years with the State Water Quality Control Board, Central Valley, about discharging water from Little John Creek, or into Little John Creek, which ultimately gets into the San Joaquin, which interestingly enough impacts fisheries because they think that there is a fishery potential on the lower Little John Creek if the water is sufficiently clean to support a fish spawning and things like that. So, I mean, I would recommend you use the word substantial because we do have a huge issue regarding naturally occurring pollutants. And the other thing that it goes to the general comments you're making about water quality, water supply. The Calaveras River, I think, is one of the most compromised rivers in the state of California. It has a lot of serious, serious problems, and it's the major river flowing through Calaveras County. It drains a lot of our county. And now it's even more seriously compromised because of the Butte Fire. And while we're anticipating substantial runoffs from sediment and stuff like that, one of the things that hasn't come up, which could be a significant issue down the road, are the issues of estrogenicity, and there's a new category within water quality, in the water quality world, called CECs, or constituents of emerging concern. And I can tell you right now, there's at least 200 dump trucks a day passing my house, taking out material, pollutants and stuff like that from the Butte Fire. And they're leaving a lot of debris behind. And
They're what?
They're leaving a lot of debris behind. And that's ultimately going to find itself into the water courses, and we're going to have to seriously look at how we manage the Calaveras River. About 8 years ago, the Department of Public Health did what they call a bathing beach survey of all of the major rivers and tributaries of the Sierra Nevada, from the Feather River right on down to the Kern. There was one particular site on O'Neill Creek, which is a tributary of the Calaveras, which measured second highest in pollution of all of the different rivers along the Sierra front. So again, when you discuss the Calaveras River, you have to be aware of the fact that it's a seriously compromised river, and it needs to get a lot of our attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Rage, General. 2 points. I was able to corner Mr. Moss outside while I had a dirty, ugly, filthy habit of smoking, and he would be more than happy to make a presentation to you. And a lot of these things that we talked about, where pollutants coming in and what underground streams coming through, he can explain, and it's a very fantastic display he has. Easy to understand. The other thing is that it was mentioned about pollutant on Calaveras River. CCW have to upgrade their filtering, whatever they do, because of manganese. That's the right word. There was a concern before; it was kept safe, but because of the fire, it's going to have to be increased for what it's worth. And to complicate some people's life, when you talk about pollutant to the water, we have an impression all water is going to go down, end up in the ocean. But there's a little thing that keeps coming up the river. And those little fishies that are coming up from the Pacific Ocean, I don't know if you noticed, but fishing cut back quite a bit in the Pacific Ocean for a simple reason. You remember the little thing that happened in Japan a couple of years ago? A little earthquake? And all the radiation? Those little radiant fishes, they're coming up, and they die up here after they're spawning. There's a reason we cannot sell or buy Alaskan king crab, for instance, and so on, and a lot of the other fish that are coming up. There's a thing called radiation. And they're coming up the river. Not that we're going to be able to do much about it, but that's reality. So we're getting pollutant, and that's not man-made, coming up on our little creeks and rivers up to Calaveras County. Just to complicate your life, that's all. Mention it. But Mr. Moss, excellent, excellent presentation on where the water is coming from. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since you opened it up, I have a question, comment, clarification on what you were discussing about the word major in minerals. My take on hearing the word major means that you're only going to be concerned in the resource production element about a major resource, not just every little mineral that's in our county. To me, to put it into a more defined area seems better than leaving it wide open, because then you can get into trouble down the road when somebody just says, well, you're just talking about all minerals. So I don't know if is that what the major means? It means just concentrating on maybe our big mines that we have here, rather than minerals that might be on somebody's property. So anyway, if that's my thought, is that the word major is actually a good thing? Maybe not, but thanks.
My take on it was that major was more exclusionary in that it allowed for, minor was more flexible and open to any size mineral operation. But Mr. Garamendi might inform us.
Well, in our group, we had representatives from it's now, I think, the Mother Lode Mineral Association, or Mining Association. And the state maps are very limited. And they do not show mineral deposits that we have here in the county that are currently commercially mined. And so, basing it on the state maps, I know that in our original element, we had spoke to getting together and identifying, like you said, additional mineral resources that are known but may not fit within what the state has classified. So that was the concern there. Just something that might help on the map. Instead of resource production, I think maybe it would be best to identify exactly what those, whether it be the Williamson Act lands and timber preserve, TPC lands, and use a specific identification for those so there's no.
They are.
They are listed individually
Well,
on the map.
just on Kelly's rewrite there, I thought it was resource production.
Well, he might have summarized it in the text in reference to the map, but on the map, the legend is as specific.
I understand.
Yes.
I misunderstood then what Kelly was referring to. That's all. Thank you.
All right, so any other revisions, changes?
I think Mr. Dean's suggestion, putting the word substantial to modify the naturally occurring pollutants is probably a good one.
My only concern about substantial is then, do you have to define substantial? And is substantial, substantial where? Where specifically would you add the word substantial? And I'm thinking.
When we did the edits at the bottom of page 2, Mr. Tuno had the language.
However, some important
Impairment.
occurs due to contact with pollutants that include both those that are naturally occurring and those introduced by human activities. I'm not sure where substantial fits in
Yeah,
there.
I'm not sure either. And besides, some could be substantial, some could not be substantial. By just adding substantial, it seems like it's giving it, I'm sure there's a lot of substantial.
I didn't see the need to
pollutants.
quantify or suggest a quantification of the two different components. I think that's kind of background information to the extent that we've got any tables on that. For example, when you want to look at the Upper Moke and you want to look above, if there's a sampling site above the Salt Springs Reservoir that shows many of these components, that's a pretty interesting fact. If it's coming from up there, then we know damn well we didn't cause it. But that's all background stuff as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm happy with just the way it is. Yeah, okay, so we're going to move on, but we should take a break. Or there's another option here is like an early lunch. It's really up to you guys. Take a break now, come back, early lunch.
I would rather break now and lunch at 12:30-ish, 12 or something like that.
Don't we have to worry about employees having a break? No?
A short break now would be helpful.
Yep.
Well, definitely a break, but
Yeah.
not, and then we'll come back. All right, so.
Yeah, it's up to you when you want to, if you want to.
So we'll be back here at 11:30, and then we'll go to probably about 12:30. And then,
I might mention that if any of you are interested in having lunch over at the senior center, they only serve from 11 to 1. So if we don't get out of here till 12:30, if you hurry, you can get there in time to get what's left.
all right, well, maybe we'll try, maybe we'll try and break about 12:15 then, Ted.
Good.
Would that be, would that be, but we want to know what's on the menu today.
I don't know.
So we'll reconvene at 11:30.
I'm sorry, Ted, I was blocking you. It's Vaughn's fault.
My fault,
It's not
always.
gonna go to us.
Vaughn and I'll pick you up.
We're going to reconvene the meeting.
Well, they're not going to have this thing in place in time for this particular issue, are they? Or are they trying to? Okay, then I
Thank you very much. All right, we are back in session, and we are starting on air quality, greenhouse gases. And we will be breaking in 45 minutes for lunch. Excuse me, can we have some quiet? Thank you. So we have comments on air quality, greenhouse gases.
We have comments on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, whoever would like to start.
Okay. Second paragraph that begins relative to air quality says Calaveras County exceeds, i.e. is classified as non-attainment for, state and federal standards for ozone and state standards for particulate matter, PM10. As I read the background report, the county was non-attainment for PM10 one time in 2008, not in 2009, not in 2010, and I don't know if there's more recent data. If we're going to say something like this, I think we should make it clear what the scope of the non-attainment was.
I agree.
Yes.
So what you're saying, based upon the technical background report, that we exceeded particulate matter in 2008 one time, and to our knowledge have not exceeded it since.
According to the technical background report, we did not exceed it in 2009 and 2010. And
Right.
that's the most recent data
Right.
that's in there.
Right. And that in 2008, we exceeded it one time, is what you're saying, is what the report said.
That's the way I read it. The other thing that the technical background reports makes clear is that the ozone emanates from outside the county and gets
Yes.
blown in.
Yeah.
And this makes it read as if we created it, and therefore it's our problem to fix it.
Well, I think it does mention that on page,
It does later on.
yes, it does later on. It does mention that. And it's like everybody gets it from somewhere, the Valley's going to say they get it from the Bay Area, and
Yeah, but this section, if I can interrupt Kelly for a moment, used to be entitled background and setting. That's been crossed out, but nevertheless, it still is background and setting in effect. And so this is the place to talk about the perspective on these kinds of issues, where primarily our air quality, or where primarily our air quality problems are coming from. So it does not, in this paragraph, address that fact that it's the valley in large part. And if the PM10 particulate matter, excessive particulate matter was only registered one time in 08 and not before that, how far back does the table go?
It only has the 3 years.
I mean, to me, that's sort of like our issue with the mineral resources, where it's a minor resource, we don't talk about it. We just talk about the major ones. And this doesn't rise, in my opinion, to the level of a major problem.
I will check with our air pollution control district and see what recent data we have. Maybe it's no longer classified as non-attainment for PM10. I don't know what the rules are as far as, if it's a one time when you're done, or
day.
if it gets over. But I can certainly add a statement that clarifies that the source of the ozone is typically from the Central Valley and perhaps even the Bay Area.
And on the point of the PM10, we were just looking at the table here. It not only is it only once in 2008, it's only one day in 2008. So it's a minor spike.
It does seem to be pretty excessive
Little-
for a one-time.
Yeah, it doesn't rise to the
So,
level of a flag.
There's been a lot of things we discussed. Let me go back and look at that data and
Okay.
clarify that paragraph.
I'm good with that.
Peter to review. You want to keep going, Kelly?
The next paragraph starts with the phrase, "General scientific consensus and census concludes that temperature increases associated with greenhouse gas emissions," and it goes on. I guess my question is that really true? That there is a general scientific consensus to that effect, because I read things that suggest that it's actually not.
I have the same question. My belief is that this references a state report, but it doesn't show the reference here. So if we're saying according to a particular state report, that we are bound to recognize there's this issue. But that's not what this does.
I agree there does need to be a source cited, not just a broad statement of general scientific consensus.
You believe there is a particular report?
I believe that there should be a source cited for this particular
A source
paragraph.
cited,
Yes.
if there is one, and you know what? I kind of doubt that that source could legitimately say that general scientific consensus concludes. I would doubt that it might say that, but I would disagree with it. I mean, I don't know what's coming out of the state, but
Some of the scientific.
I don't think this is settled science.
Some of the scientific resources are political scientists.
Thank you, Ted.
I think if there is a state report, as Commissioner Tuna pointed out, that concludes that temperature increases, et cetera, then we should just reference that state report. And not get into whether there's general scientific consensuses or not, because it doesn't really matter.
I hate that whole paragraph.
All right, so Peter's going to look into the source of this statement.
Okay.
Other comments?
No.
So, I mean, I just had a question. The last sentence on this page, it said, "It is unlikely that programs Calaveras County may adopt will play a significant part in overall reductions." You know, it's like, that's so negative. I mean, every little thing you do is going to have an impact.
But a significant part?
Well, I mean, what's significant? I mean, it could be significant.
I guess the purpose of that statement was that, whether you believe in climate change or not, the state requires that we somehow reduce overall statewide greenhouse gas emissions. And the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that emanate from this county are a very small percentage of the emissions statewide. But
Well, not only that, Peter, sorry.
we have to contribute our fair share in some way. We're not going to change greenhouse gas emissions by anything we do here. Even if we stop driving altogether in Calaveras County, the amount of vehicle traffic that we generate compared to the rest of the state is minuscule. But we still have a responsibility under state law to come up with some programs to add our, our portion of that reduction.
And
that's what I'm trying to say by that statement.
But the changes in paragraph 2 that we discussed are going to hopefully add a perspective to that issue, because it's not just Calaveras County can't affect the state. Calaveras County can't even affect Calaveras County in any significant way.
Well, we're sort of talking about two different things. Yeah, and you're right. The greenhouse gas issue is not localized. Emissions go up into the air from Calaveras County affect the whole state. Pollutants are much more easily tracked. You can tell, you can do a monitoring of, how much ozone is in the air. you can figure out where it comes from. So that's different. So paragraph 2 talks specifically about pollutants. Paragraphs 3 and 4 talk about greenhouse gas emissions and SB or AB 32 and the state laws associated with that.
One thing I have to throw this out. You just made the big mistake a minute ago by referring to climate change. And what are we talking about? Global warming or climate change? They're not related. They may have the same final outcome, but they're completely different issues. And there's
I'm trying to avoid that issue as much as possible while still maintaining the, addressing the requirements of state law that a county general plan address greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just that's global warming. But you use the word climate change, and that's a whole different issue. That's not caused by the little old ladies with their SUVs. That's a completely different issue. Climate change is a big global issue that is going to be here whether we like it or not, so we better be prepared. But no, I think that we should refer to one or the other because they're not the same.
Okay.
Is the phrase Sustainable Community Strategy, SCS, is that a
Term of art?
a term from on high?
Yes.
I thought so.
And just so we're clear, Peter, as I read this, the state does require that we put into the general plan steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Is that right?
Yes.
So we'll put some big fans up on the county line and blow it all back.
Oh, no, suck it down and filter it out.
And thank you.
I have one wordsmithing suggestion on this, which is at the bottom of page 7, where it says it is unlikely. I would put the while before it is unlikely, because I think the sentence as it sits doesn't read very well.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, I agree.
Just a question on associated plans and documents, second sentence. Data used in preparing the general plan, should it be and available or are available at the planning department or air pollution control district?
It's a rather convoluted sentence. The verb is at the very end of the sentence. And something's missing there unless otherwise. So the data used in preparing the general plan and available at the department are what's listed below. I'm not sure what the other, unless otherwise.
Needs some work.
Yeah.
Or you could just say which are available.
So you'll fix that, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on the air quality? No? All right, so...
Well, back on that sentence,
Pardon me?
back on the sentence that you just had a difficulty with.
Yes?
The last phrase, unless otherwise are,
I think he's getting rid of that, too. Yeah.
Well, it says unless otherwise stated, so there could,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of.
That's part of the fix.
Yeah, I will correct that sentence.
So scenic resources? I think we're going to move through a few sections.
We could probably get through all the way through cultural and paleontology.
Well, let's just go for it then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If we go to scenic resources and then.
If
do
we get all the way
public
to the
comments,
policies,
it'll
then
be
we,
12:15.
that's a nice clean break.
So scenic resources.
Oh, you ain't stopping at recreation.
I have nothing on
I
that.
have nothing.
I just had a question. Mining landscapes. I've really never seen that term used before. Is that mining landscapes?
That's like the cement plant slag pile out of town. Very
Just-
scenic.
Yeah, I'm just saying, mining landscapes, I don't know, you know.
You can't miss it.
Would
Again,
sites
not all
be,
this language is mine, so.
Yeah.
I'll look at it.
I
don't
just,
know.
you know, it's like a mining landscape.
That was on what
Scenic.
the-
how about mining view sheds?
There you go, that's
No.
almost as good.
You don't like that?
No,
Oh, come on.
no.
How about mining sites?
Yeah, some of
And
it
I'm
is
not
like
sure
the
that we
terracing.
necessarily-
You
I
see
mean,
it
should mining
terracing hill,
landscapes
and
be in
some
there
of
at
it's
all?
from
It's not
Blakestown.
something that I think that
It's
the
scenic.
citizens are considered scenic
Yeah.
necessarily, so maybe we just strike that phrase. I mean, it is part of the historic character of the community.
I'm just, you know, I don't mean to make a big deal out of it. It just, to me, it's like mining
No,
landscapes,
That's
you know.
why I substituted the word sites,
Yeah.
because it's a location where there's been mining. Or mining locations. Well, we got both, don't we?
Forests, rolling hills, ranches, ag land. Maybe historic landscapes, and that would include mining and any other activity that went
Let's
on
do
in the
that.
past.
That would be
rather than
good,
mining.
historic landscapes, yeah. Thank you. Okay, moving on to next one. Any other comments? Anything on scenic? No?
No,
Recreational resources, or recreation resources?
nothing from me.
Okay, I had a question on second to last paragraph. So it says, other privately owned recreational facilities include Salt Springs Valley Reservoir and limestone caves. I guess there should be a period.
There is a period. It's at the end of what was.
Oh,
struck out.
right, okay, what was struck. So everything else was struck. I mean, what makes these recreational resources?
I just didn't think it was necessary to list what caves were there. It seems to, I mean.
Oh,
It's
I
just a
see
general
that these are
statement.
all limestone caves.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't, you know, I'm like, well, right, so it's just like generic limestone
Yeah.
caves. Okay. That's good. That's all I had.
Just as we sort of struck out the list of
That's
all the various
fine.
public.
That's
just-
fine.
Just to condense it.
Yes, yes. Well, and there could be new ones come in and old ones, who knows, you know,
Mhm.
could be,
Develop a
yeah,
private recreation resource.
right.
So I have comment on that. I was contacted by several people because in our area of the district, they point out that a lot of those hikings, the rim trail, the biking, the equestrian trails, go through our public forest lands, and that those trails were built specifically for them, and in the process, they shut down their off-road vehicle trails. Now they're working on closing snowmobile trails, and they are asking specifically why those aren't considered recreational activities and why they continue to shut them off, because it has affected our tourism as the closures take place. And they would like those things back in as part of recreational for our county. And it specifically, when we get further into this, it's going to state all non-motorized, which totally cuts them out completely, and they want to see trails rebuilt and opened back up for that purpose.
Well, that's really beyond the scope of this general plan. That'd be part of the forest management plan that the Stanislaus National Forest.
But we reference everything else
We
in
do
that,
say
though, and that's
many
that's
miles
the
of-
issue that they have. They're
Yeah.
referencing, we're going to support all of the non-motorized activities on the forest lands, and it's recreational, so you can either have both or none. I mean, it's like we're catering to one and not including all. That's the notices that I've been getting.
There is a sentence at the very end of that last paragraph, many miles of multiple use trails exist on national forest land, so it does recognize that there are other
Okay,
trails.
so when we get to the goals and implementations, the words
Yeah.
non-motorized can be removed?
And maybe just in the far as consistency, we left out we struck out the specific listing of various resources. We don't need to list which trails are there. We can just say, there's, hiking and horseback riding trails on public lands. It doesn't really matter to me, one way or the other.
Okay, we'll get to it when we get to goals then.
Okay.
I just had an edit on the top of the associated plan and documents. The county maintains, strike just the county maintains plans regarding recreational resources.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
I'm sorry, what was that you said?
It was just the first sentence under associated plans and documents, just striking so it reads, the county maintains plans regarding recreational resources.
Oh, yeah.
Are we on to cultural and paleontological resources?
Yes.
Okay. Comments?
One typo at the bottom of page 10, second line from the bottom. John J. Cinder House should be Snyder.
Should be, I'm sorry, Kelly, what?
Snyder.
SNY, not SYN.
SNYD, okay. And then I had one other comment. I actually sent you an email about Peter, and that under the local registers, the county doesn't have a local register of historic properties. So my question is what about the historic, the design review guidelines in McCollum Hill that includes 55 structures that have been designated historic, and that those guidelines have been adopted by the Board of Supervisors? So doesn't that in itself make it a county register of historic properties?
Does what constitute a register?
The community, the McCollum Hill design review guidelines that has 55 structures listed as historic?
By the state agency?
By the county Board of Supervisors, it's adopted.
Okay, I've kind of been through this historic thing before on another issue, and you have to establish yourself as a qualified historic review entity to make such designations, as far as the state, to be on a register, as far as I know. And the state has its own, some of which might include county buildings and sites. And then there's for example, a qualified entity is the one that we have in the Valley Springs area. It's called, somebody knows, West County Historic Society? And who runs that? Right, Salmana. They are a qualified entity for that designation. The state recognizes them. Yeah, I think more than that, but, so that's how it works with respect to historic sites. The board can do a resolution and say, we think it's a historic site, but.
I think I have a number of lists of historic buildings, but are they officially on a register?
Yeah.
That has some kind of legal standing?
That's just my question. It says that we don't have a local county register of historic properties. And my question is, does the Board of Supervisors adopted, it's design review guidelines that includes 55 buildings in McCollum Hill as historic properties subject to design review? Does that constitute a county register? That's my question.
I don't believe that it does, but we may want to add something to this discussion of other lists of historic resources that have been, accepted by the county. I think that the term register, as Commissioner Tuna was pointing out, has some kind of meaning to it beyond just simply listing historic structures. I will check that out.
Okay. And related to that, then associated plans and documents, that would the design review guidelines from McCollum Hill be a associated plan or document?
We can certainly add it.
was all. Did anybody else have anything on this section? No? Okay. Members of the public, if you'd like to address the commission on these new sections of air quality, greenhouse gases, scenic resources, recreational resources, and cultural and paleontological resources.
Peter Ridge, gentlemen. I don't know how your pages go, but my pages from the computer were downloaded. It's on COS 3.4, and this is what it says. Develop and adopt comprehensive strategy to reduce GHSs, what Calaveras County...
Mr. Race, we're not there yet. We haven't.
You're not there yet?
We're
Because
not
we were
there
talking
yet.
about air quality.
No, but we're not, that's in the policies, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
You're not talking about that.
We're talking about the discussion.
We're talking about the background.
We're going to go there.
Yeah, but we're not there yet.
You need lunch first, trust me.
You need a candy bar. Vicki Reinke, Calaveras County Republicans. On the air quality gas, greenhouse gases, I agree with what was said earlier about the paragraph 3, that general scientific consensus concludes. I know that there is controversy over that, and then also the fact that results in existing water resources, decreased snowpack. I don't know why that's even in here, because I look at nature, Mother Nature. You can't control Mother Nature. People think it's man-caused. Well, that they can think that, but I see it as Mother Nature. I think that whole paragraph just needs to be gone. I don't know what it means, how it pertains to anything we have any control over. So anyway, that was just one comment. And I think for me, and there is some concern about that development of sustainable community strategies. That terminology is suspect in my mind, and so I think we better be very careful what exactly does that mean, and what are we committing ourselves to. So anyway, those are the two things, and it's, everything else is fine. Thanks.
Thank you.
Joyce Teckle, myvalleysprings.com. An analogy. Think of recycling. It's only effective when a lot of people participate in it. They may be doing it at a very small level, but when you get a lot of people doing it, you have an effect. Greenhouse gas, the same thing. If we address everything we are aware of that we can address to help improve that situation, and the state is requiring other counties to do that, cumulatively, I know that's a word we don't like to use here, that will have an effect. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen Platt, on that same paragraph, the greenhouse gas paragraph, could we just eliminate the first 5 words? General scientific consensus concludes that, and start with temperature increases associated or expected to do this and that. Would that just help that situation?
Well, I can present it to the commission,
Yeah,
your
that might be
suggestion.
easier to get through. And then on the historical, cultural and paleontological resources, I also would like to encourage you to include something under local registers or associated plans and documents that do refer our historical societies and our lists that we do have, such as Salmana's list in the West County and the Calaveras Historical Society, who have lists of, they have websites, they have publications, at least put their names there so we know we have historic houses that maybe they didn't make it to the state register, but we know that they're there. We've got the Wildermuth House down there, that they have tours at by the Pardee, and we have the Late House, the White House in Valley Springs. Everybody knows about that, and the train depot, and we've heard that the Calaveritas Bridge has now been deemed historic. So I'd like to see that on there. And Joyce says there's lots of other places that, we all know about. They're on lists, or somehow get them in there, and some, not that you have to list every single one, but, refer to where those lists might be found in the local societies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Vicki Mills, Vallecito. Going through this list of California Register of Historic Resources, historical landmarks, point of interest of historical interest. I notice there is one place that is part of, or is listed in the state historical registrar that is not in here. And it's in the Murphys area, and it is Mercer Caverns. Lucy Berryessa worked diligently back in the 80s to get that to happen. And if we're going to mention these other things, including the Vallecito Bell Monument, I think we should mention Mercer Caverns. Thank you.
Thank you. Vallecito Bell Monument, is that in here somewhere?
Yes,
Last,
it is.
last thing under the state list.
Oh. Go ahead, thank you.
Good afternoon, Tanya Dowson from Valley Springs. The Sustainable Community Strategy wording will need to come out of the general plan. That stems from SB 375, and residents of Calaveras County made it loud and clear that they didn't want that as a part of our general plan. Back when Caltrans and MyValleySprings.com got a grant to try to put Rancho as part of their plan back there, I think it was about 500 residents from Rancho came to protest at the elementary school there with signs, Rancho out. They don't want any part of it, and I can't support any plan that has the sustainable communities strategies in it. It undermines our property rights, and also on a note on the historic, designating properties historic, I hope that that is going to be done with property owners' permission, because otherwise it could have detrimental effects on property owners who may not want their properties designated as historic. If somebody wants to preserve certain properties, they can purchase properties themselves and preserve those as historic, but it shouldn't be put on other people who may not want that. Thank you.
Bill McManus, Calaveras Project. I want to agree with Commissioner Allred about the difference between global warming and climate change. I think whenever you try to codify terms like that into a document like the general plan, you're at risk of being proven wrong before too long, and that you just stay away from things that haven't been proven or reasonably substantiated. Neither one of those has been ultimately proven or substantiated. As far as greenhouse gases, Calaveras County just recently contributed a huge amount of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. It's called a Butte Fire, and it happens all the time. From aerial photography, the smoke plume from Calaveras County reached as far as Reno and areas beyond that. So what do we do about that? Well, we have to prevent forest fires. Well, that's easy to say and a little bit harder to do, and then we find ourselves in conflict with our own general plan that may not allow for proper management of the forest, which will reduce the incidence of catastrophic fire and maybe reduce the greenhouse gases that ensue from a fire without so much material being burned. So You start doing things like that, and you're chasing your tail within the general plan document. Another caution I would add is anything having to do with historical. Back in the 80s, I was on a committee, and we were dealing with this in Murphy's when I lived down there. As soon as you mention the word historical, that's a classification of its own. And then it begets other classifications, whether it be historical structure, historical site, historical district, which is the most extreme case. And again, that's a word that if you're going to include it in the general plan, there's other ways of doing that without calling it historical and giving it some legal significance. Because whether it's a register is one classification, a historical site is another classification, and when you get to a district, which we fought in Murphy's, that becomes like an overlay for all of the zoning in the area, and new rules and restrictions apply to every property owner within that historical district. The historical district becomes like a homeowner society on steroids, and they can tell you what color to paint it, how you have to maintain it, the historical nature, what you have to preserve, and your rights as a property owner are completely taken away and given over to a committee that will tell you how to take care of your property. So I just caution the use of the word historical and maybe find some other word that doesn't commit the county to down a path that takes you where you really don't want to go, with incremental increases in restrictions and requirements placed on property owners in a historical area like McCollum Hill or Murphy's or most of the communities in Calaveras County. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Race, General N. Concerning the sustainable living, can anybody on this board or in this room please give me some idea or example where it's been implemented and successful, please?
What implemented?
Sustainable living. I'd like to know some examples on it. What is considered a successful implementation of sustainable living? Because the ones I've seen in Sacramento, it's a ghetto. And I see what I see in San Francisco. I don't want any. Or LA. So I would love to have some examples of successful establishment of sustainable living. It's an ideology, but show me some facts. Show me some examples. Show me some numbers. Description, definition. Thank you.
Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. I don't have a document to refer to. I'm just going to respond to some of the points that have been brought up. I would say to the question of sustainable living, I would define that as anything that doesn't impair the ability to keep living. That's how I would define it. Something that was destroyed to the point where you're no longer able to use the property or the resources in the way they have been used before. And when people talk about property rights, there's more entailed than a right. It's a responsibility that goes beyond one person's choice to perhaps destroy land or resources so they're no longer available for other people. Now, I just want to say that being in denial of something does not negate the actual existence of something. So when someone comes up here and says, oh, you know, there's no such thing as greenhouse gas effect, that's denial. It's an unwillingness to accept other people's point of view and perhaps evidence, maybe scientific evidence, because when you're in denial, you put blinders on, you put ear pads on. You can't hear or see anything other than what you already have internalized. Then, I would like to say if we're talking about the trails, if this is the time that that was brought up, that trails that are used for hiking and horseback riding, to allow motorized vehicles on these trails often destroys the ability for hikers and horseback riders to use those trails. It's not only a polluting factor, but there's a danger factor. If you've ever been on a trail and there's a ATV coming at you, you better get out of the way, because majority of those people will not see you. They will not provide access to you. They will just run right over you. Then, as far as reducing greenhouse gases and our commitment to reduce it, maybe excluding motorized vehicles from these trails might satisfy that requirement. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lou Mayhew, it's a little off any detailed comments, but I just hope you don't get too upset about the occasional use of the word sustainability. In a way that appeals to our better angels, I think where it can be used effectively, it's as opposed to use up or degrade a resource to the point where it's no longer usable. I mean, this world and this country and this state is full of examples of where that happens. The resources are finite. Many may not be in immediate danger of causing significant problems, but some can. So this is not an Agenda 21 plot, but where in the general plan, using the word sustainable to, again, appeal to the better angels of what we hope is a future that can continue is very appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for further discussion, and maybe perhaps we can kind of go through the list like before. Works for you guys? Okay. Okay, so Vicki had a comment on page 3 that, that we cite a source again. Oh, it wasn't, I'm sorry, it wasn't page 3, it was
Page 7.
the paragraph about,
7?
Yeah, page 7.
page 7, the paragraph about that we've been discussing about needing a source for this. So I think we are going to be reviewing that paragraph as well. And then she, along with us, which we'll get to, had comments regarding the sustainable community strategy. And to be honest with you, Peter, I'm not sure, so is this, what is the sustainable community strategy?
It is a tool that's identified in the text of the state laws regarding greenhouse gases that is a tool that could be used to identify, when it looks at the activities of the county and how we are generating greenhouse gases. It looks at traffic patterns, it looks at a variety of sources, industrial uses, anything that has that potential to emit greenhouse gases. And then it sort of identifies potential options that we could implement that could reduce that. And then ultimately, it's the county's choice as to what of those are we going to adopt.
So in the text, it says development of a sustainable community strategy as a primary tool. It doesn't say we're going to develop one here.
Well, typically what would happen, and I think Mr. Reyes asked the question, where has it been done? And I know a number of counties, El Dorado County developed one when I was there, developed a strategy. We hired a consultant. Often those are funded through PG&E, provided a number of grants to do that. Because they are, as a public utility, they're also having to look at how are they going to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions as a regulated utility under the PUC. So they were helping counties and communities to do the analysis up front. And then they provide sort of a list of options that the county can then select. So what this would be, and I think it's probably reflected in the
I was gonna say, we
goals
must
and
have
policies
we
and
must
the
have-
mitigation measures, that this is something we could consider doing to address the requirements of state law.
Okay.
Thank you.
In addressing the requirements of the state law, that's what we're talking about doing here.
Yes.
Okay. Does the state say you need to have this so-called SCS strategy? Do you need to formulate a document that addresses this one issue using their set of tools?
I'd have to go back and look at the specific language of the statutes. My recollection, my understanding is that we have to adopt some strategy.
Okay.
Whether it is included specifically in the general plan, it's a separate document. The term of art that's been used is a sustainable community strategy. It's been widely accepted throughout the state as a tool that could be used to sort of demonstrate that.
Okay.
And rather than try to do that now as a part of this general plan, let's say, we're going to do that. And if, again, it doesn't actually have to be titled that. We could come up with a different name if that's a problem.
Okay, or if you were to do this, if you were to go through the process and you were to hire a consultant, and here's all the things that you can do, wouldn't we find, excuse me, in large part, and not that we have to do them all, right? But in large part, wouldn't we find, well, by golly, in our circulation element, for example, we do a lot of that. We look at traffic patterns and try to reduce amount of vehicular traffic through various means.
Right.
Okay, so in large part, we would have already included those measures. We would have addressed this issue in our general plan without going to the process of coming up with a strategy. The strategy, the elements of the strategy are already in large part embedded in our plan, I think. They seem to be to me.
That's certainly part of the intent of, some of the policies that were developed for the draft circulation element. I think that it goes a little bit beyond that. It tries to quantify to the degree possible, what these steps could take, and something a little bit more than sort of generalized policies, some actual, practices we could put into place, and some measures that the county actually could do.
Okay, and in doing so, would it not run contrary to the board's directive not to get into specific implementation measures or implementation measures to that level of specificity, where you start talking about quantifying this goal or that?
Well, that's why it's not going to be included in this element. It's a separate document, right, Peter?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what he's saying. Yeah.
Okay, if what you're saying is also that we really don't need to even reference this particular tool, a primary tool, but we don't know that we're going to use this primary tool. We intend to meet our obligations with the state, as this paragraph is aimed at expressing, but this particular tool is not something that we're saying, we're going to adopt it, we're going to use it, we're going to hire a consultant.
So what you're suggesting is this paragraph be a little more generic, and rather than specifically reference sustainable community strategy, we just come up with some sort of more generic language that says we'll come up with the appropriate tools and measures necessary to achieve. I'd have to go back and look at the language of the statute just to be sure that it's not, this is what you have to use.
Yes, we need to do that, obviously.
And if it doesn't say that, then, we could modify that so we,
Then,
we're not specific.
then the
as to
modification, if you will, could read something to the effect that the county will look to its obligation with respect to the state in whatever elements of the general plan applicable actions can be implemented. Terrible language, but something along those lines. because that's where it's going to end up anyway. It's going to be scattered around here and there.
Did you read SB 375?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it's pretty clear, the language, and it sounds like it has to be attached to your transportation plan. It needs to be in your general plan, and I was looking at all the counties that have already adopted into their general plan.
Yeah.
You're going to have a tough time getting rid of this.
Well,
It's in there.
I have no doubt that 375 lists requirements for the county to address the issue. I have no doubt about that. My feeling is that we are doing so where we can. And if other counties want to say, okay, we're going to go whole hog, and we're going to hire a consultant to write us up a plan that's based upon this strategy and plop it into our general plan, let them do that. But I don't think in doing so, they would be doing any more than what we are doing.
Okay.
I think it's an extra expense, your time, consultant dollars, to achieve something that we're likely to achieve anyway during the course of our general plan update. I think we're already doing it.
Well, so, Peter, you're going to look into...
I'll look into that. I'm
Okay.
not sure that the general plan policies get to the level of specificity necessary to satisfy
You're still going to have
SB
to do.
375 requirements.
Yeah, okay, so I'm
We might-
concerned with,
We might have to do something, we will probably, I'm sure we'll have to do something else besides just simply reference the policies that we have in our general plan, even though they are in some ways directing us in that to reduce greenhouse gases.
okay, so we need a blurb on what the state's requiring of us.
So I'll do some more research when we come back, and I'll double check, I'll see what other counties have done and see what it is that we have to do.
And to the
modify the
extent,
language if we can.
and to the extent that we can edit some of our components to plop in a level of some specificity that satisfies the requirement, then I'd be in favor of those kinds of adaptations, those kinds of edits, as opposed to ginning up a new report for this purpose.
Okay.
But I would also add this, because we're talking about the same subject, and that was paragraph 3 in that same section. Paragraph 4 that we were just talking about talks about the fact that we know the state requires us to do things and we're going to do them. Okay? Paragraph 3 talks about what the effect of all this might or might not be, might be. I don't think we need paragraph 3 at all. We meet our obligation. We are addressing the issue with paragraph 4. We're saying we're doing this. If people want to believe that it affects the snowpack, then let them believe that, and that's their business. If the people think it's not going to really affect the snowpack or the tourism is listed here, all those kinds of things, that's kind of up to them to extrapolate the effects of addressing greenhouse gases, which we're required to do, extrapolate that to various other components of our lives.
I'll leave it up to the wisdom of the commission whether or not to strike.
And maybe
that
this
or
is one of
modify
those
that.
consensus issues that we should arrive at.
I think so.
Well, and I'm in favor of leaving it in with a source cited, because I think it is important to, I'm in favor of leaving it in with a source cited.
Well, I do have some issues with that same paragraph, because it would seem to attribute things like a decreased water supply to greenhouse gas emissions. That might be a very minor thing. Your decreased water supply might have to do with a lot of brush eating up all your water, and little trees and things like that.
It lays a lot of effects at the feet of greenhouse gases.
Yeah. Increased risk of wildfire, same comment. I mean, this county gets dry every summer. It's been that way for a long, long time. And there comes your increased risk of wildfires when you couple that with the fuel load that we now have. It's reasonable to say that greenhouse gas emissions don't play a very large part in that. And this seems to suggest that they do or will. And since nothing in that paragraph seems to be necessary to support any goals or policies or implementation measures, I guess I'm not sure it should be in there.
So we're going to have to break here for lunch soon. Is there some consensus on this? Or do you want to wait, break for lunch, come back? Ted's got to get over to the senior center. We're already past the 12:15.
Well, I don't know how many more people want to comment on it. If there's lots of comments, then, but if there aren't, then maybe we can arrive at a consensus and then break.
Well, as I said, I'd like to leave it in with a source. I think it is important to kind of set the stage.
I don't, because I don't think that there's anything here that's supporting it, and so I would remove it.
Okay, so we've got 3 for removal. Ted?
I don't think it belongs there.
Okay, so I guess it's out. All right, so with that, then we'll see you all back here at 1:30. Yes, we are recessed.